I am Tara, 32 years old, and my family left me bleeding out in an intensive care unit. I woke up alone to the steady beep of a heart monitor, only to learn my parents and sister had looted my purse and abandoned me to board a luxury cruise. 10 days later, when my sister finally sauntered back to the hospital demanding to see me, the head nurse delivered a reality check that left her trembling. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to stand up to family who underestimated your worth. Pain was the first thing that registered. It was a blinding, white-hot throb radiating from the center of my skull, pulsing in time with a rhythmic, high-pitched beep that echoed somewhere to my left. I tried to open my eyes, but the harsh fluorescent lights above me felt like physical blows. My eyelids fluttered against heavy bandages. The sterile chemical smell of bleach and rubbing alcohol filled my lungs as I took a shallow breath, which immediately sent a sharp, agonizing spike of pain through my ribs. I groaned, the sound harsh and scratchy in my dry throat. Slowly, the blurred shapes around me began to come into focus. I was in a hospital bed surrounded by an intimidating array of medical equipment. IV lines snaked into the back of my bruised hand. A heavy brace secured my neck, keeping me perfectly still. The memories of how I got here returned in fragmented, terrifying flashes. The pouring rain on the interstate, the blinding glare of oncoming headlights, the deafening crunch of metal tearing into metal, the sensation of my car spinning wildly out of control before slamming into the concrete divider. I had been driving home from a meeting with my legal team, a meeting that had just secured my future. Then nothing but darkness. My heart rate elevated, causing the monitor beside me to chirp faster. I tried to turn my head to scan the room, desperate to see a familiar face. Where was my mother, Brenda? Where was my father, Harrison? Surely my older sister, Vanessa, was sitting in a chair nearby, complaining about the uncomfortable hospital seating, but waiting for me to wake up. We had our differences, endless, exhausting differences, but I had just survived a catastrophic car accident. I was family. They had to be here. I blinked against the glaring light, letting my vision adjust to the corners of the small, sanitized intensive care room. The visitor chairs were completely empty. There were no coats draped over the armrests, no half-empty coffee cups on the side table, no hushed whispers of concern. The room was utterly devoid of any human presence besides my own broken body. A chilling, absolute silence hung in the air beneath the mechanical hum of the life support systems. I was completely alone. Panic began to set in. Perhaps they were in the waiting room. Perhaps they were speaking to a surgeon in the hallway. I managed to slide my uninjured hand across the crisp, stiff hospital sheets until my fingers brushed against the plastic nurse call button. I pressed it, my hand trembling from the exertion. Within moments, the heavy wooden door pushed open. A woman in dark blue scrubs stepped into the room. Her name tag read, Gloria, Head Nurse. She had kind, tired eyes and an expression that shifted from professional alertness to profound sympathy the moment she saw I was awake. "You are with us, Tara," Gloria said, her voice soft but authoritative as she moved swiftly to my bedside. She began checking the monitors, adjusting the flow of my IV, and shining a small penlight into my eyes. "You gave us quite a scare. You were brought in 2 days ago with a severe concussion, 3 fractured ribs, and a lacerated spleen. You have been unconscious since the surgery." 2 days. The words echoed in my throbbing head. I had been lying here fighting for my life for 48 hours. My family. I managed to croak out, my voice sounding like crushed gravel. "Where are they? Please tell me they are okay. Were they in the crash?" Gloria paused. The practiced, reassuring smile dropped from her face, replaced by a look of deep, uncomfortable hesitation. She looked down at her charting tablet, then back up at me, her hands clasped tightly together in front of her scrubs. "They were not in the crash with you, Tara," Gloria said carefully, measuring every word. "The police contacted them using the emergency information in your phone. They came to the hospital about 4 hours after you were admitted to the surgical ward." Relief washed over me for a fraction of a second before the reality of the empty room crashed back down. "Then where are they?" I asked, a sense of dread pooling in my stomach. Did they go to the cafeteria? Gloria let out a slow, heavy breath. She stepped closer to the bed, lowering her voice as if she were about to deliver a fatal diagnosis. Tara, I have been a nurse for 30 years, and I have seen many things. But I need to be honest with you. Your family is not in the cafeteria. They are not in the waiting room. They left the hospital entirely about an hour after they arrived. Left, I repeated the word, making no sense. Why would they leave? I was in surgery. Gloria reached over to the small rolling tray table next to my bed. She picked up a small clear plastic belongings bag. Inside was a single crumpled $50 bill. She placed it gently on the blanket near my hand. When your mother and a sister arrived, they spoke to the attending surgeon. Gloria explained, her tone laced with a quiet, simmering indignation. The doctor informed them that you were stable, but would need to remain in the intensive care unit for at least a week to monitor the internal bleeding, followed by several weeks of recovery. Your sister Vanessa immediately asked the security desk for your personal belongings. They handed over your purse, which had been recovered from the wreck. My purse, my wallet, my keys, my identification, my credit cards? Your family told the front desk staff that they had a non-refundable 10-day luxury cruise to the Bahamas scheduled to depart from Miami the following morning. Gloria continued, her eyes locked onto mine with a mixture of pity and outrage. Your mother explicitly stated that since you would be unconscious and under hospital care anyway, there was no point in them missing a trip that had already been paid for. They took your purse, claiming they needed to secure your valuables. Your brother-in-law Jamal left this $50 bill with the receptionist and said it was to cover any incidentals you might need when you woke up. Then they walked out the front doors and got into a cab. The silence that followed was deafening. The rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor spiked, betraying the violent surge of adrenaline and disbelief flooding my veins. My family, the people who shared my blood, had stood outside the operating room where doctors were stitching my ruptured organs back together, and their biggest concern was missing a vacation. But it was not just any vacation. I was the one who had paid for that cruise. I had booked that 10-day Bahamas trip 6 months ago as a gift for my parents' 40th anniversary. I had paid for the VIP balcony suites, the premium drink packages, the private shore excursions. I had done it because I was the dutiful, responsible daughter, the medical data analyst making a 6-figure salary, who was always expected to fund the family luxuries, while Vanessa, the golden child, squandered her money on designer bags, and her husband Jamal drove his car dealership further into debt. They took my purse. I whispered, the sheer audacity of the betrayal making me physically nauseous. Yes, Gloria said gently. I am so sorry, Tara. We tried to stop them from taking your identification, but your mother legally signed for the belongings as your next of kin since you were incapacitated. I wanted to call Adult Protective Services, but legally, since you are an adult, there was nothing we could do to force them to stay. They left me $50, I said, staring at the crumpled green bill resting on the pristine white sheet. The visual representation of my worth to them. $50 to cover a traumatic brain injury and internal bleeding. I need a computer, I said, my voice suddenly shifting. The trembling fear evaporated, replaced by a cold, sharp, metallic clarity. The dutiful daughter who had spent 32 years craving their approval died right then and there on that hospital bed. Gloria, please. I know this is highly irregular, but I work as a data analyst. I know my account numbers by heart, but my phone is gone. I need access to a secure web browser immediately. Gloria looked at my vital signs on the monitor, then looked at the fierce determination setting in my eyes. She did not argue. She did not tell me to rest. She simply nodded, turned around, and left the room. Less than 5 minutes later, she returned carrying a hospital-issued clinical tablet. She wiped it down with an alcohol swab, unlocked the administrative restrictions using her credentials, and handed it to me. Take all the time you need, Gloria said softly. I will make sure nobody disturbs you. I thanked her with a brief nod. My fingers ached, and my vision blurred slightly from the concussion, but muscle memory took over. I opened the browser and navigated to the web portal for my encrypted cloud messenger. I typed in my credentials, bypassed the two-factor authentication using my backup email, and logged into my messages. The family group chat titled The Fabulous Five had dozens of unread messages. My heart pounded against my fractured ribs as I clicked on the thread. The messages had started rolling in just hours after they left the hospital. Vanessa. Just boarded the ship. The VIP suite is massive. Thanks to Tara for being the ultimate sugar mama even from a hospital bed. Jamal, yo, did anyone tell the nurse we took her platinum card? I needed to cover the valet parking at the port. Besides, she is not using it in a coma. Brenda, Jamal, do not be tacky. We are just holding on to her cards for safekeeping. Though I did use the black card to upgrade us to the captain's dining table. Tara would want us to celebrate our anniversary in style. She is fine, the doctor said she is stable. No point in us sitting in a waiting room drinking stale coffee for a week. Harrison. Exactly. The girl has good insurance from her corporate job. She is in good hands. Jamal, order another round of those expensive scotches on her tab. Consider it a hazard pay for having to deal with the stress of the accident. Vanessa. Honestly, it is classic Tara to ruin our travel mood with a car crash. At least she had the decency to pay the balance before she wrapped her car around a pole. I read the messages over and over again, letting the sheer, unadulterated venom of their words burn into my memory. There was no concern for my life. There was no fear of losing me. There was only annoyance that my near-fatal accident might have inconvenienced their boarding time, followed by gleeful celebration that they now had unrestricted access to my finances while I lay unconscious. Jamal, my brother-in-law, the man who was currently facing multiple lawsuits for rolling back odometers at his failing car dealership, was using my credit cards to buy premium liquor on a cruise ship. Vanessa, the sister who had belittled my career in data analytics as boring nerd work, was sleeping in a luxury suite I had financed. My parents, who had constantly demanded I bail Jamal and Vanessa out of their financial disasters, were treating my money like a bottomless ATM. I minimized the chat application and opened a new tab. I navigated to my primary banking portal, my fingers flying across the digital keyboard. I logged into my checking accounts, my savings accounts, and my credit card dashboards. The dashboard loaded and the numbers confirmed my absolute worst fears. In the 48 hours since I had been lying in this hospital bed, they had gone on a rampant, unchecked spending spree. There were charges for thousands of dollars at the Miami cruise terminal boutiques. There were massive pending authorizations for the onboard casino. Jamal had apparently used my card to purchase luxury watches at the duty-free shop. Vanessa had booked thousands of dollars in premium spa treatments. My credit limits, which were exceptionally high due to my excellent credit score, were being drained with ruthless efficiency. They had already racked up over $28,000 in unauthorized charges. They thought I would be out cold for weeks. They thought I would wake up weak, confused, and desperate for their affection, easily manipulated into forgiving their theft, as I had forgiven a lifetime of emotional abuse. They thought I would just pay the bill to keep the peace, to maintain the illusion of a happy family. They thought wrong. I closed my eyes for a brief moment, letting the physical pain in my chest merge with the emotional devastation. It forged a new kind of armor around my heart. I was a medical data analyst. My entire career was built on identifying patterns, isolating anomalies, and executing precise, calculated solutions. My family was a toxic anomaly, and it was time to execute a solution. I opened a new tab and pulled up the directory for my personal attorney, David Vance. David was not just any lawyer. He was a high-powered estate and corporate litigator. More importantly, he was the attorney who had been representing me in the wrongful death and patent infringement lawsuit regarding my late husband, Michael. Michael had been a brilliant biomedical engineer. 3 years ago, he developed a revolutionary surgical device that had the potential to save countless lives. Before he could fully patent the technology, his former employer stole the designs and rushed them to market. The stress of the betrayal took a massive toll on Michael. He passed away from a sudden massive stroke shortly after leaving me a young widow with a mountain of legal documents and a vow to clear his name. For 3 years, I had fought the corporation tooth and nail. I spent my nights analyzing the data, working closely with David to prove Michael's original authorship. My family had mocked me the entire time. Vanessa called me a grieving lunatic clinging to a dead man's pipe dream. Harrison told me to drop the lawsuit and find a new husband to support me. But I did not drop it. And on the very morning of my car accident, David and I had sat in a mahogany boardroom and signed the final settlement papers. The corporation had capitulated, admitting fault and agreeing to a massive payout to Michael's estate, of which I was the sole beneficiary. The settlement was $22 million. I had been driving home from that meeting completely overwhelmed by the victory when the accident occurred. My family had no idea. They thought I was just Tara, the dependable, boring data analyst they could walk all over. They had no idea they had just stolen credit cards from a woman who was about to become a multi-millionaire, a woman who now had the resources to absolutely destroy them. I dialed David's emergency private number using the hospital's internet calling application on the tablet. He answered on the second ring. Tara, David's voice came through the speaker, tight with anxiety. "My God, I have been trying to reach you for 2 days. The police called my office because my card was in your glove compartment. I have been fighting the hospital administration to get updates on your condition. How are you? Are you safe? I am in the ICU." "David," I said, my voice shockingly steady despite my physical injuries. "I survived, but I need you to listen to me very carefully. I am initiating an emergency financial lockdown, and I need you to execute it immediately." I explained everything. I told him about waking up alone. I told him about Gloria finding the $50 bill. I told him about the stolen purse, the group chat messages, and the $28,000 in fraudulent cruise ship charges. I did not cry. I delivered the information with the clinical precision of an analyst reporting a critical data breach. David was silent for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was dangerously quiet, vibrating with professional fury. "Consider it done. I am contacting the fraud departments of all your credit issuers right now. I am freezing every account connected to your Social Security number. The charges they made on that ship will be flagged as stolen immediately. Do not alert the authorities on the ship yet." I instructed, a plan rapidly forming in my mind. Let them enjoy their cruise. Let them order champagne and buy expensive watches. Let them rack up the bills believing my money is paying for it. I want the card decline notifications to hit them while they are trapped at sea, but I do not want them arrested by maritime security. I want them to face the consequences on my terms when they return. "Understood," David said. "We will dispute the charges as fraudulent, shifting the liability back to the merchants and your family. By the time they dock, they will be facing massive personal debt to the cruise line. What about the settlement funds? Route the $22 million into a newly established blind trust," I ordered. "They do not know about the settlement. They do not know we won the case before the crash. I want that money entirely insulated from any familial ties. Furthermore, David, I want you to find me a private, high-security penthouse in the city. I am not going back to my old apartment where they have a spare key. I want a fortress. When the hospital discharges me, I want to disappear from their radar completely. I will arrange for private medical transport and secure a luxury lease by the end of the week," David promised. "Tara, what they did to you is unforgivable. Leaving you in an intensive care unit to go on vacation is monstrous. They are going to pay for every single thing they have done." I said, my grip on the tablet tightening. "Not just the stolen credit cards, David. I am talking about the years of manipulation, the emotional abuse, the way they enabled Jamal's fraudulent business while draining my savings. I want you to start compiling a dossier on Jamal's car dealership. I want to know exactly who his creditors are." "I will put a private investigator on it today," David replied. "Focus on healing Tara. I will handle the tactical execution. You just get your strength back." I ended the call and handed the tablet back to Gloria, who had been standing quietly by the door acting as a guard. She looked at me with a mixture of awe and profound respect. "Is everything handled?" Gloria asked softly. "Yes," I replied, sinking back into the hospital pillows, the physical exhaustion finally catching up to my adrenaline-fueled rage. "Everything is locked down." I spent the next 9 days in that hospital bed, healing in absolute silence. There were no stressful phone calls from my mother demanding I pay Jamal's overdue rent. There were no passive-aggressive texts from Vanessa complaining about her life. The absence of their toxicity was the most effective medicine I could have received. My fractured ribs slowly began to knit together. The internal bleeding subsided. I worked with physical therapists in the hallways, pushing through the agonizing pain with a singular focus. Every step I took was a step closer to my new life, a life where I held all the power. True to his word, David was magnificent. He froze all my compromised accounts, successfully disputing the cruise ship charges as blatant credit card fraud. He established the blind trust, quietly securing the $22 million settlement from Michael's lawsuit. He also leased a stunning state-of-the-art penthouse in a luxury high-rise downtown. The building featured 24-hour armed security biometric elevator access and a strict no-visitor policy without direct resident approval. It was completely impenetrable. On the 9th day, my medical team cleared me for discharge. I was still bruised, still requiring pain medication and moving slowly, but I was stable. David arranged for a private car service to transport me from the hospital directly to my new penthouse. Before I left, I sat on the edge of the hospital bed, dressed in new comfortable clothes David's assistant had purchased for me. Gloria came into the room to hand me my discharge paperwork. "You look like a completely different person than the woman who woke up here a week ago." Gloria smiled, handing me the clipboard. "I am a different person," I replied, signing the forms. "The woman who paid for their lives died in that car crash." As I walked toward the elevator, leaning slightly on a cane for support, I stopped at the main nurses' station. I knew my family's cruise was scheduled to dock in Miami tomorrow. I knew that after disembarking, they would fly back to the city, and eventually they would have to come to this hospital to keep up appearances. "Gloria," I said, leaning against the high counter, "when they come back, when they inevitably walk up to this desk and demand to see me." Gloria smiled, a sharp, knowing expression that perfectly mirrored my own satisfaction. "Do not worry about a thing, Miss Tara. I know exactly what to say to them." I took the elevator down to the private garage, slid into the back of the waiting luxury sedan, and watched the hospital recede in the rearview mirror. My new life had begun, and the stage was perfectly set. Now all I had to do was wait for the rats to return to the sinking ship. The sweltering heat of the Miami cruise terminal was doing nothing to improve Vanessa's foul mood. She dragged her oversized designer suitcase across the concrete pavement, her face twisted in a permanent scowl. Beside her, Jamal was aggressively tapping the screen of his phone, cursing under his breath. The final morning of their luxury vacation had ended in absolute humiliation. When they attempted to disembark the ship, a purser had discreetly pulled them aside, informing them that every single credit card on file had been declined. The $28,000 in charges for premium liquor spa treatments and duty-free watches had bounced back as fraudulent. The cruise line had forced Jamal to sign a legally binding promissory note before letting them off the vessel, leaving him legally responsible for the massive debt. "This is ridiculous," Brenda complained, fanning herself with a glossy travel brochure. "Tara must have missed a payment before she wrapped her car around that divider. How irresponsible can she be?" We were completely embarrassed in front of the captain. Harrison scoffed, adjusting his golf shirt. "She always was careless. The moment we get back, I'm taking over her finances entirely. If she is lying in a hospital bed, she clearly cannot manage her own accounts. I will need power of attorney to sort out this mess she caused us." They settled into the uncomfortable chairs of the airport departure gate, waiting for their flight back home. Jamal wiped a bead of sweat from his forehead. His car dealership was already sinking, and now he had a massive debt hanging over his head. He desperately refreshed his banking apps, praying for a miracle. Frustrated, he opened a news aggregator application on his phone, mindlessly scrolling through the business section to distract himself from his impending bankruptcy. Suddenly, Jamal froze. His thumb hovered over the screen. He blinked hard, reading the headline once, twice, then a third time. The color drained from his face before rushing back in a surge of pure, unadulterated shock. Vanessa Jamal gasped, his voice cracking as he shoved the phone into his wife's hands. "Look at this. Read it right now." Vanessa rolled her eyes, annoyed by the interruption, but took the device. Her eyes scanned the bold black text. The article was from a major financial news outlet published just a few days ago. The headline read, "Major Biomedical Corporation Settles Patent Dispute for $22 million. Sole beneficiary named as widow. Vanessa read the first paragraph aloud, her voice trembling. After 3 years of intense litigation, the estate of the late biomedical inventor Michael has reached a historic $22 million settlement regarding his stolen surgical device patents. His widow and sole beneficiary, medical data analyst Tara, finalized the agreement on Tuesday morning. The silence that descended upon the four of them was absolute. The background noise of the busy airport terminal seemed to vanish completely. $22 million. Brenda whispered the number rolling off her tongue like a prayer. She grabbed the phone from Vanessa, her eyes wide with predatory greed. Our Tara, our little plain Tara, is sitting on $22 million. Harrison sat up perfectly straight, his earlier annoyance completely replaced by calculating focus. The settlement was finalized on Tuesday morning. He looked at Brenda. That was the exact same morning she had her car accident. She must have been driving home from the lawyer's office. Jamal leaned forward, his hands shaking with excitement. Do you realize what this means? She is rich, filthy, disgustingly rich. She can pay off this cruise debt with pocket change. She can bail out my dealership. We are set for life. We need to handle this perfectly, Harrison commanded, his voice taking on the authoritative tone he used when he was scheming. Tara is weak. She is easily manipulated, especially when she feels lonely. She has been lying in that intensive care unit for 10 days with no visitors. She is probably terrified and desperate for her family. Brenda nodded vigorously, a sickeningly sweet smile stretching across her face. We will go straight to the hospital the moment we land. We will tell her we were trapped at sea and could not get a flight back any sooner. We will cry. We will hold her hand. We will tell her how much we love her and how scared we were. I will stop at the gift shop and buy the biggest teddy bear they have, Vanessa chimed in, already planning her performance. I will tell her how sorry I am that we fought in the past. Once she is emotional, Dad can bring up the power of attorney again. We will tell her it is just to relieve her stress so she can focus on healing. Exactly, Harrison agreed. We get her to sign over financial control while she is still heavily medicated. We tell her we are doing it to protect her from predatory lawyers. Once I have control of that trust, we will never have to worry about money again. The four of them sat in the airport terminal, a tight circle of predators practically salivating over their next meal. The cruise debt was forgotten. The resentment was gone. In their minds, Tara was no longer the family disappointment or the boring data analyst. She was a golden goose, entirely vulnerable, lying incapacitated in a hospital bed just waiting to be plucked. They boarded their flight with smiles on their faces, rehearsing their tears and their apologies, completely unaware that the woman they intended to manipulate was no longer the victim they had left behind. The flight touched down in the city, and the four of them did not waste a single second. Jamal drove his leased luxury SUV like a getaway driver, swerving through traffic and running 2 yellow lights to get to the hospital. The entire ride was a masterclass in sinister preparation. Harrison sat in the passenger seat, carefully reviewing a blank power of attorney document he had hastily downloaded and printed at an airport business lounge. He smoothed the creases, making sure the signature line was clearly marked. In the back seat, Brenda was practicing her performance. She pulled a compact mirror from her designer handbag, smudging her mascara, just enough to look like a woman who had been crying for days. She pinched her cheeks to give them a flushed, frantic appearance. Beside her, Vanessa clutched an oversized, obnoxiously bright pink teddy bear they had purchased at the hospital gift shop for $40. Jamal held a small bouquet of wilting daisies he had grabbed from a gas station. They were armed with cheap props and multi-million-dollar ambitions. Remember the plan, Harrison instructed, his voice cold and commanding, as Jamal threw the SUV into a parking spot right outside the emergency room doors, completely ignoring the no parking signs. We go in there looking devastated. We tell her the cruise ship lost communication signals due to a storm. We tell her we were trapped on the water, crying every night, begging the captain to turn the ship around. We overwhelm her with love. We make her feel like the center of our universe. Once she is crying, I will tell her that managing her medical bills and insurance is too stressful for her in her current state. I will slide the paper over. She signs, and we win. Got it, Jamal said nervously, adjusting his collar. Just get her to sign. My creditors are calling every 5 minutes. If I do not have proof of funds by tomorrow morning, they are going to repossess the dealership lot. Do not panic, Jamal. Vanessa snapped, fluffing the pink teddy bear. She is my little sister. She is desperate for our approval. She always has been. I will cry, hold her hand, and tell her how much I need her. She will probably hand over her bank passwords before Dad even has to ask. They stepped out of the vehicle and walked through the sliding glass doors of the hospital. The moment they crossed the threshold, the transformation was terrifyingly seamless. Brenda let out a loud, theatrical sob, pressing a tissue to her face. She leaned heavily on Harrison, who wrapped a supportive arm around her shoulders, his face twisted into an expression of grim fatherly concern. Jamal followed close behind, looking suitably distressed, while Vanessa held the giant bear against her chest like a shield of sisterly devotion. They bypassed the main reception desk entirely, assuming their status as immediate family granted them VIP access. They marched straight to the elevators, pressing the button for the surgical intensive care unit. The ride up was silent, save for Brenda practicing her sniffles. When the elevator doors slid open on the critical care floor, they stepped out ready to deliver the performance of a lifetime. The ICU waiting area was quiet, filled with the soft hum of medical machinery and the hushed voices of actual grieving families. Brenda ignored them all, amplifying her fake sobs to ensure everyone in the vicinity knew exactly how much she was suffering. They strode down the pristine white hallway, heading directly for the main nurses' station that guarded the private rooms. Standing behind the high counter, organizing a stack of patient charts, was Gloria. The head nurse did not look up immediately, calmly finishing her paperwork as the chaotic family approached. "Excuse me," Vanessa demanded, her voice sharp and ringing with entitlement, completely abandoning the devastated sister act the second she had to speak to a service worker. "We are looking for Tara. She was brought in 10 days ago after a car accident. We are her immediate family." Gloria slowly closed the medical chart she was holding. She placed her pen on the desk and looked up, her expression completely unreadable. She recognized them instantly. She remembered the designer clothes, the arrogant posture, and the profound lack of empathy from the day they had stolen Tara's purse and left a $50 bill on this exact counter. "Name again," Gloria asked, her voice dangerously calm, refusing to give them an inch. Tara. Vanessa huffed, rolling her eyes and slapping her hand on the counter. "Tara. I am her older sister, Vanessa. This is her mother, her father, and her brother-in-law. We have been trapped out of the country on a boat and just rushed straight from the airport. We need to see her right now. Which room is she in?" Brenda stepped forward, pushing past Vanessa, tears streaming down her carefully powdered face. "Please, nurse. My baby girl. I need to see my baby. I have not slept in days worrying about her. Is she awake? Can she speak? We brought her flowers and a bear. Please tell me my little girl is going to be okay." Harrison placed the folder containing the power of attorney document on the counter. "We also need to speak with the hospital billing administrator," he said smoothly, adopting his best corporate executive tone. "I am her father. I need to take over her financial and medical decisions to relieve her of the stress. Where can I find her attending physician to get these documents authorized?" Jamal shifted his weight nervously from foot to foot, holding the wilting gas station flowers. "Just point us to the room, lady," he muttered. "We are family. We have a legal right to be here." Gloria stood perfectly still, letting their demands hang in the sterile air of the hospital corridor. She looked at Brenda's fake tears. She looked at Jamal's cheap flowers. She looked at Harrison's legal folder, knowing exactly what kind of financial trap it contained. And finally, she looked at Vanessa, who was glaring at her with a mixture of impatience and superiority. "I see," Gloria said, her voice dropping to a low, icy register that commanded absolute silence. "You are the family that left for a cruise." Vanessa bristled, her eyes narrowing. "We had a non-refundable trip. That is none of your business. Now stop wasting our time and take us to my sister. We know she is in the ICU." Gloria did not flinch. She simply crossed her arms over her dark blue scrubs and offered Vanessa a smile that was completely devoid of any warmth. Vanessa leaned over the counter, her patience evaporating. Listen to me very carefully, she hissed, pointing a manicured finger at Gloria. My sister is lying in a bed somewhere in this ward. She is severely injured and she is terrified without us. I demand that you open these doors and take us to her immediately, before I call the hospital board and have your job. Do you know who we are? Gloria did not blink. Yes, she replied evenly. I know exactly who you are. You are the people who took a trauma patient's identification and credit cards. You are the people who left $50 to cover a ruptured spleen. Brenda let out a loud, dramatic gasp, clutching her chest as if she had been physically struck. How dare you speak to us like that? We are a grieving family. You have no idea the agony we have been through miles out at sea, unable to reach our precious Tara. We are here to bring her home. We are here to take care of her affairs. Harrison tapped the desk aggressively. We do not need a lecture from the nursing staff. We need room numbers. We have legal documents that need signing today. Her insurance needs to be sorted, and I am the only one authorized to do it. Jamal stepped up right beside Vanessa, trying to look intimidating. Look, we are not leaving this desk until we see her. So either you push that little buzzer and let us into the ICU, or things are going to get very ugly very fast. Gloria looked at the four of them, a tight, desperate circle of greed disguised as familial concern. They were so confident, so entirely certain that their manipulation would work, that Tara was just a helpless victim waiting for them to sweep in and take control of her new fortune. They had no idea that the ground beneath their feet had already crumbled. Are you refusing to let a mother see her critically injured daughter? Brenda cried out loudly, hoping to attract the attention of passing doctors. Is this how this hospital treats loving families? Vanessa slammed the pink teddy bear onto the counter. I am not asking again. Where is my sister? Gloria did not flinch at the loud thud of the stuffed animal hitting her workspace. She calmly picked up the bright pink teddy bear by its ear and pushed it back across the counter toward Vanessa. You will not be needing that here, Gloria said, her voice echoing clearly down the sterile corridor. And to answer your demanding question, your sister is not in the intensive care unit. She is not in the surgical ward. In fact, she is not in this hospital at all. The arrogant sneer on Vanessa's face faltered, replaced by a sudden sharp confusion. What do you mean she is not here? Vanessa demanded, looking around as if Tara might suddenly appear from behind a medical cart. We were told she had severe internal bleeding. She cannot just walk out. We are her family. We demand to see her. Brenda grabbed the edge of the counter, her fake tears instantly drying up. Did you transfer her to a cheaper facility, Harrison? I told you we should have handled the insurance before we left. Listen to me, nurse. I am her mother. You have no right to move my daughter without my explicit consent. Harrison aggressively tapped the blank legal folder on the desk. This is completely unacceptable. If you have transferred her to a substandard clinic, I will sue this hospital for gross negligence. I demand to know where my daughter is right now. She is medically vulnerable and requires her family to oversee her recovery and her finances. Gloria let a slow, mocking smile touch the corners of her mouth. She is not in a substandard clinic, sir. She was discharged. Jamal let out a loud, scoffing laugh, throwing his hands in the air in disbelief. Discharged. With a ruptured spleen and a traumatic brain injury. Do not play games with us, lady. A patient in that condition does not just get up and walk out the front door. She did not walk. Gloria corrected her tone, remaining absolute ice. She was escorted out by her private medical transport team exactly 9 days ago. The entire family froze. The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. 9 days ago. Brenda shook her head, her face turning a sickly shade of gray as the timeline clicked in her head. 9 days. But she was in a coma. She was dying. We checked the medical reports before we boarded the ship. She woke up 48 hours after the crash, Gloria stated, staring directly into Brenda's eyes, watching the mother squirm. She woke up entirely alone. She woke up to find her purse stolen, her identification missing, and a crumpled $50 bill left on her bed. And let me tell you, waking up to that reality cured her need for her family instantly. Vanessa stumbled back half a step, clutching the cheap pink teddy bear to her chest. Who picked her up? She does not have anyone else. She is single. She is just a boring data analyst. Who the hell is a private medical transport team? Harrison slammed his hand on the counter. I do not care who picked her up. I am her father. I hold the power of attorney. I demand her new address immediately. She is not in her right mind. She cannot make decisions for herself. Gloria actually laughed this time, a short, sharp sound of pure disdain. You hold nothing, sir. The only thing you hold is a piece of paper you printed off the internet an hour ago. The hospital administration was notified the moment Tara woke up. Her actual legal representation, a high-powered estate litigator named David, arrived within the hour. He immediately established a medical directive and an ironclad privacy injunction. Tara is currently recovering in a high-security private luxury penthouse, and her exact location is strictly confidential. The mention of a high-powered estate litigator hit Harrison like a physical blow. The color drained from his face. A lawyer. Why would she call a lawyer? She has no need for a lawyer. Because she checked her bank accounts, Gloria said, leaning forward over the counter, closing the distance between herself and the predators. She checked her accounts from a hospital tablet and saw $28,000 in fraudulent charges originating from a cruise ship. Jamal let out a choked gasp, stumbling backward until his back hit the hallway wall. He looked like he was about to pass out. The cruise. She knows about the cruise. Brenda grabbed Harrison's arm, her perfectly manicured nails digging into his sleeve. Harrison, what do we do? She locked the accounts. That is why the cards declined at the port. She locked us out. Vanessa threw the teddy bear on the floor in a sudden fit of rage, her voice rising to a shrill scream. That selfish brat. We are her family. We had an emergency. We just found out she has $22 million from a settlement. She can afford to pay for a vacation. She owes us for everything we have put up with. Give me her address right now. I am going to march over to that penthouse and demand she fix this mess. You are not going anywhere near her, Gloria replied, her voice ringing with absolute finality. You no longer have sister privileges. You no longer have parental rights. You are nothing to her but a liability. Harrison tried to salvage his crumbling authority, puffing out his chest. You cannot keep a father from his daughter. I will get a court order. I will call the police and report her lawyer for kidnapping an incapacitated patient. That will not be necessary. Gloria smiled, a terrifyingly bright expression that made Harrison take a step back. You do not need to call the police, sir. They are already here. The family stared at her, completely uncomprehending. The arrogance stripped away, leaving only raw, naked fear. Gloria gestured calmly toward the elevator bank behind them. When you bypassed the main reception desk downstairs and came straight up to the intensive care unit, the security team notified me. I made a quick phone call. The police officers are currently waiting for you in the main lobby. Jamal's eyes widened in sheer terror. Police? For what? We did not do anything wrong. We are family. We share expenses all the time. Taking a trauma victim's identification and credit cards while they are unconscious is theft, Gloria explained, enunciating every single syllable so they could fully grasp the magnitude of their actions. Fleeing the state while a dependent relative is in critical condition is abandonment. But more importantly, making $28,000 in unauthorized charges across international waters constitutes felony credit card fraud and wire fraud. Brenda began to hyperventilate, clutching her chest as she looked wildly down the hallway. No, this is a mistake. I am her mother. A mother cannot steal from her own daughter. Tell them it is a mistake. We will pay it back. Tell them yourself, Gloria said, pointing to the elevator doors that had just slid open. Two uniformed police officers stepped out onto the intensive care floor. They were accompanied by a stern-looking detective in a sharp gray suit holding a clipboard. Vanessa let out a sharp, panicked shriek, trying to hide behind her father. Jamal looked wildly around, frantically searching for a stairwell, a fire exit, any way to escape the impending doom. But there was nowhere to run. The hospital corridor was a dead end. Harrison raised his hands in a desperate, placating gesture as the officers approached. Officers, please. There has been a terrible misunderstanding. My daughter is confused from a head injury. We are a respectable family. We just returned from a family trip. We are here to pay her medical bills and take her home." The detective looked at the blank power of attorney document still resting on the nurse's counter. He looked at the discarded pink teddy bear on the floor. Then he looked directly at Harrison with an expression of pure disgust. "Mr. Harrison," the detective said, his voice echoing loudly in the quiet hospital corridor, "we have a sworn statement from your daughter Tara alongside extensive banking records and security footage from the Miami Port Authority. You and your family are coming with us to the precinct right now." Jamal fell to his knees, his hands covering his face as he began to sob hysterically. "I cannot go to jail. My dealership is already bankrupt. I owe dangerous people money. Please, I just wanted to buy a watch. I just wanted a watch." Brenda dropped her designer purse, the contents spilling across the pristine hospital floor. She reached out toward Gloria, her face a mask of absolute desperation and panic. "Please, nurse, call Tara. Tell her mother is sorry. Tell her we love her. Tell her to call off the police. Just let me speak to my baby girl." Gloria picked up the medical chart she had been organizing when they first arrived. She did not look at the crying mother. She did not look at the sobbing brother-in-law. She looked only at the security guards who were now assisting the police in escorting the frantic, screaming family toward the service elevators. "Your baby girl is gone," Gloria said softly to the empty hallway as the elevator doors finally closed on their terrified faces. "And she is never coming back." The heavy metal doors of the downtown precinct slammed shut with a deafening clang, severing my family from their luxurious delusions and trapping them in a cold, unforgiving reality. The transition from the extravagant Miami cruise ship to the sterile, fluorescent-lit booking area of the police station was a brutal shock to their systems. The smell of ocean breezes and expensive champagne was instantly replaced by the sharp odor of stale coffee sweat and industrial floor cleaner. For people who had spent their entire lives hiding behind a veneer of upper-middle-class respectability, the booking process was an absolute nightmare. The officers were professional but entirely unmoved by Harrison's corporate bluster or Brenda's hysterical sobbing. They were instructed to empty their pockets, remove their belts, and hand over their shoelaces. "Do you have any idea who my lawyer is?" Harrison demanded, his face purple with outrage as an officer coldly instructed him to place his custom leather belt into a clear plastic bin. "I am a respected business owner. This is a civil misunderstanding between family members. You are violating my rights." The booking officer did not even look up from his computer monitor. "Sir, you are being charged with multiple counts of felony credit card fraud and grand theft. Your daughter provided a sworn affidavit. Save your defense for the judge. Now turn around and place your hands flat on the ink pad." Brenda wailed loudly as a female officer confiscated her pearl necklace and diamond rings. She looked entirely unhinged. Her expensive vacation clothes wrinkled her mascara, running in dark rivers down her cheeks. "You cannot put me in a cage," Brenda cried, clinging to the edge of the booking counter. "I have a delicate constitution. I need my anti-anxiety medication. I am a mother." Vanessa was completely silent during the mugshots, staring at the camera with a look of pure, venomous hatred. Her mind was frantically trying to calculate how this would destroy her carefully curated social media image. She had planned to post dozens of photos from the captain's table tonight, bragging about their elite status. Instead, she was standing against a height chart holding a numbered placard. But it was Jamal who was unraveling the fastest. The confident, fast-talking car broker who had spent $28,000 of my money on luxury watches and premium scotch was now hyperventilating in the corner. He knew the criminal justice system was not going to be lenient on him, especially with his ongoing investigations for odometer fraud at his failing dealership. When the heavy iron gate of the temporary holding cell slid shut behind the four of them, Jamal sank to the concrete floor and put his head between his knees. "This is a disaster," Jamal gasped, pulling at his hair. "A complete disaster. My creditors are already threatening to break my legs, and now I am catching felony fraud charges." Vanessa rounded on her husband, her eyes blazing with fury. She kicked his shoe with her bare foot, having been stripped of her designer heels. Do not make this about your stupid car lot, Jamal. This is your fault. You are the one who bought those Rolex watches on the ship. You are the one who maxed out the platinum card. Jamal jumped up, pointing a trembling finger in Vanessa's face. Excuse me, you booked a $4,000 couples massage package and ordered vintage champagne to the room every single night. Do not act like you are innocent. Your crazy sister set a trap for us and we walked right into it. Stop it, both of you, Harrison barked, pacing the small confines of the cell like a caged animal. Arguing gets us nowhere. We need to focus on getting out of here before the local news catches wind of this. If my business partners see my mugshot on television, I am financially ruined. We need to post bail immediately. Their bail hearing was swift and merciless. The judge took one look at the amount of money stolen, the fact that the crimes were committed across international waters, and the clear flight risk they presented. Bail was set at $50,000 each. A total of $200,000 was required to secure their release, meaning they needed $20,000 in non-refundable cash just to pay a bail bondsman. Harrison, pay the bondsman, Brenda pleaded, clutching the bars of the holding cell. Transfer the money from your savings. Get us out of this filthy place. Harrison's jaw tightened. I cannot, he muttered, looking away from his wife. My accounts are tied up in the new property development. If I pull 20 grand in cash right now, the bank will flag the withdrawal and freeze my commercial credit lines. I do not have the liquidity. Vanessa gasped, looking at her father in horror. Are you saying we are going to rot in jail because you tied up all our cash? Harrison glared at Jamal. I am saying that since Jamal spent the most money on that ship, Jamal needs to figure out how to get us out of here. Call your dealership partners. Call your investors. Get the money. Jamal looked terrified. My investors. Harrison, my investors are not exactly people you call for a friendly loan. They are loan sharks. Dangerous men. If I ask them for 20 grand to post bail for wire fraud, the interest rate will be 50% a week. They will own me. Then let them own you, Vanessa screamed, her voice echoing off the concrete walls. Call them right now. I am not spending the night sleeping on a metal bench next to an open toilet. Call them, Jamal, or I swear I will divorce you before the sun comes up. Backed into a corner, completely stripped of his pride, Jamal begged the guard to use the precinct's payphone. With trembling hands, he dialed a number he had promised himself he would never call again. He stood facing the wall, whispering frantically into the receiver, sweating profusely as he agreed to predatory, ruinous terms. He was borrowing $20,000 from violent criminals just to secure their temporary freedom, putting his life and his remaining assets on the line. 2 hours later, the paperwork was processed. The heavy metal doors buzzed open, and the family was released into the humid evening air. They walked out of the precinct looking like shadows of their former selves, stripped of their jewelry, their confidence shattered, smelling of sweat and absolute desperation. Jamal checked his phone, which had just been returned to him from the evidence locker. A text message from his loan shark glowed on the screen, detailing the brutal payment schedule he had just agreed to. He swallowed hard, feeling physically sick. Get the car, Harrison snapped, straightening his wrinkled collar and trying to salvage his dignity. We are not going home. Where are we going? Brenda asked, rubbing her wrist where the handcuffs had bruised her skin. We are going to find Tara Harrison, said, his eyes darkening with a vicious, desperate resolve. She thinks she can send us to jail and keep $22 million for herself. She thinks she has won. We are going to march right into whatever hospital or clinic she is hiding in, and we are going to make her drop these charges today. They piled into Jamal's SUV, completely unaware that I was no longer an easy target, recovering in a vulnerable hospital bed, but a woman sitting in a highly secured penthouse, watching their every move and waiting for them to walk directly into the next phase of their destruction. Finding me was not as simple as they had arrogantly assumed. When returning to the hospital yielded nothing but threats of trespassing charges from the administration, my family was forced to rely on Jamal's illicit connections. Sitting in the humid cabin of his SUV, desperate and sweating through his wrinkled vacation clothes, Jamal contacted a skip tracer who frequently helped his dealership track down repossessed vehicles. It took a few hours of bribing and illegal database searches, but they eventually managed to trace the registration of the private medical transport company David had hired. The route led them directly to the heart of the downtown financial district. The Obsidian Tower was an architectural masterpiece of black glass and polished steel, widely known as the most exclusive residential high-rise in the city. It was a fortress designed specifically for billionaire celebrities and individuals who required absolute privacy. When Jamal abruptly parked his dusty SUV in the pristine circular driveway, the valet attendants immediately stepped forward with expressions of polite disdain. The four of them spilled out of the vehicle looking absolutely unhinged. They had spent the night in a concrete holding cell, stripped of their jewelry and their dignity. Their designer clothes were rumpled and stained with sweat. Brenda's makeup was severely smudged, giving her the appearance of a deranged raccoon, while Harrison's usually immaculate hair was sticking up in erratic angles. They marched through the revolving glass doors and into the sprawling temperature-controlled lobby. The floors were cut from seamless imported marble, and the air smelled faintly of expensive cedar and citrus. Behind a massive monolithic desk stood the concierge and two broad-shouldered security guards in tailored dark suits. Harrison approached the desk with the manufactured confidence of a man who believed his mere presence commanded respect. "We are here to see Tara," he announced, slapping his hand flat on the polished marble. "She is a resident here. We are her immediate family, and we require access to her floor right now." The head of security, a towering man whose name tag read, Officer Davis, did not even blink. He looked at the disheveled group with professional detachment. "Good afternoon, sir. This is a secure access building. No visitors are permitted beyond the lobby without direct biometric authorization from the resident. I do not have a guest pass registered under that name." Vanessa pushed her way to the front, her eyes wide with frantic manic energy. "Listen to me. My sister was in a severe car accident. She suffered a traumatic brain injury, and she was essentially kidnapped by a predatory lawyer who hid her in this building. We have the legal right to check on her well-being. If you do not let us up that elevator this second, we are calling the news networks and telling them you are holding a medically compromised woman hostage." Officer Davis remained completely unfazed. "Ma'am, if you believe a crime has been committed, I encourage you to contact law enforcement. However, if you do not lower your voice and step back from the desk, I will have you removed for trespassing." That was the exact trigger Brenda needed to initiate her performance. Right on cue, she collapsed to her knees on the cold marble floor, letting out a loud theatrical wail that echoed off the high ceilings. "My baby," Brenda sobbed, burying her face in her hands and rocking back and forth. "They are keeping my baby from me. She is up there all alone, scared and confused. Please, I am a mother begging you. Just let me see my little girl." Jamal immediately pulled out his phone, holding it up as if he were broadcasting live to his non-existent followers. "This is discrimination," Jamal shouted, pacing aggressively in front of the desk. "You see a black man walking into a luxury building, and you automatically treat us like criminals. We are a grieving family trying to see a sick relative, and your security team is harassing us. We are going to sue this entire establishment for emotional distress." The spectacle was loud, embarrassing, and entirely calculated. They were weaponizing their perceived victimhood, relying on the assumption that a luxury building management team would do absolutely anything to avoid a public scene. They wanted to create so much pressure, so much loud, uncomfortable friction, that the staff would simply cave and grant them access just to make the screaming stop. 60 floors above them, I sat in the expansive living room of my new penthouse, watching the entire pathetic display unfold in high definition. The building administration had linked the lobby security cameras directly to my wall-mounted tablet. I sat curled on a plush cream-colored sofa, wrapped in a soft cashmere blanket, sipping a cup of chamomile tea. The physical pain in my ribs was dull, managed by the medication, but my mind was sharper than it had ever been. I watched my mother fake her sobs on the marble floor. I watched Jamal aggressively wave his phone in the security guard's face. I watched Harrison posture and threaten lawsuits he could no longer afford to file. They looked so desperate, so entirely stripped of the effortless superiority they had wielded over me my entire life. The tablet chimed softly. It was a direct call from the security desk. I tapped the screen to answer. Miss Tara Officer Davis spoke, his voice remaining perfectly calm, despite the chaos visibly happening in the background of the video feed. I apologize for the disturbance. We have 4 individuals in the lobby claiming to be your family. They are causing a significant disruption. Would you like me to contact the authorities and have them forcibly removed from the premises? I took a slow, deliberate sip of my tea, watching the screen. If I turned them away now, they would only come back. They would camp outside the building, harass the staff, and continue to spin their victim narrative to anyone who would listen. They needed to learn in no uncertain terms that their tactics no longer worked. They needed to step into my domain on my terms and face the absolute reality of their new position. No, Officer Davis. I replied, my voice steady and devoid of any emotion. They are indeed my family. You may grant them access to the private elevator. However, I want a full security detail stationed in the hallway directly outside my front door. If I give the word, I want them detained immediately. Understood, ma'am, he replied. Sending them up now. I ended the call and watched the video feed. Officer Davis signaled to the concierge, who tapped a keycard against a hidden sensor. He pointed toward a set of frosted glass elevator doors. I watched as Brenda miraculously recovered from her devastating grief, instantly springing to her feet and dusting off her knees. Harrison adjusted his collar, a smug, victorious grin spreading across his face. Vanessa smirked, flipping her hair over her shoulder as they marched toward the elevator bank. They stepped into this private cab, completely convinced that their temper tantrum had worked. They thought they had bullied their way into my sanctuary. They thought I was sitting upstairs, weak, terrified, and ready to hand over my settlement money just to buy back their affection. I set my teacup down on the glass coffee table and picked up a thick manila folder David had prepared for me earlier that morning. I placed it squarely in the center of the table. I smoothed the wrinkles from my clothes and sat up perfectly straight, ready to welcome the rats into the trap. The heavy steel doors of the private elevator slid open with a soft chime, delivering my family directly into the grand foyer of my penthouse. They stepped off the marble threshold, their collective breath catching in their throats as they absorbed the sheer magnitude of the space. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking panoramic view of the city skyline. Custom-blown glass chandeliers cast a warm, expensive glow over the imported Italian leather furniture and modern art pieces. For a fleeting moment, their frantic desperation was entirely eclipsed by raw, unadulterated greed. Their eyes darted around the room, mentally appraising every fixture, already calculating how much of this wealth they were going to claim as their own. Brenda was the first to snap back into her rehearsed performance. She let out a strained theatrical sob and rushed across the pristine white rug, her arms outstretched like a martyr greeting a survivor. "Oh, Tara, my sweet, brave girl. You have no idea what an absolute nightmare we have been living." "Stop right there," I commanded. My voice was not loud, but it possessed a sharp, cutting edge that froze her instantly. "Do not take another step toward me. Sit down." Harrison puffed out his chest, his face flushing with indignation as he tried to reclaim his usual patriarchal authority. "Now listen here, young lady. We have been through hell and back trying to get to you. You have no right to use that tone with your mother after the severe emotional trauma we have just endured." I gestured calmly to the long, curved sofa opposite my armchair. "Sit down, or the armed security team waiting in the hallway will drag you right back to the concrete holding cell you just came from." The threat worked perfectly. The reminder of their recent incarceration drained the false bravado from Harrison's face. They moved stiffly to the sofa, sinking into the plush cushions. Vanessa crossed her arms, glaring at me with barely concealed envy, while Jamal nervously wiped his sweaty palms on his wrinkled trousers. "We are just so relieved you are alive," Brenda began again, lowering her voice to a placating maternal whisper. She wiped a non-existent tear from her cheek. "Tara, you have to understand why we left the hospital. We were completely devastated. When the doctors told us you were in a coma, I nearly collapsed. But the head surgeon pulled your father aside and assured us you were absolutely stable. He said the best thing for you was quiet rest, and that sitting in a waiting room would only ruin our health." Harrison leaned forward, clasping his hands together in a display of manufactured sincerity. Exactly. You have to look at it logically, Tara. You spent thousands of dollars booking that anniversary cruise for us. You worked so hard to give us that gift. How could we insult your generosity by letting those expensive tickets go to waste? We knew you would wake up and be furious if we missed the boat because of a temporary medical setback. We went on that trip to honor you. The sheer breathtaking audacity of their mental gymnastics was almost impressive. They were genuinely trying to frame abandoning their critically injured daughter as an act of profound familial respect. And taking my purse, I asked, my voice remaining entirely detached. Draining my credit cards to buy premium liquor and spa treatments, was that also an act of profound respect? Vanessa rolled her eyes, scoffing loudly, as if I were being deliberately stubborn. Oh, grow up, Tara. We took your purse to protect it from hospital thieves. You know how those public facilities are. People steal from unconscious patients all the time. We were doing you a favor by securing your valuables. And yes, we used your cards. We were trapped on a ship, incredibly stressed out about your condition, and we needed to self-medicate to cope with the anxiety you caused us. You should be apologizing to us for ruining the first half of our vacation with your reckless driving. I simply stared at her, letting the silence stretch out until the atmosphere in the room became suffocatingly tense. They shifted uncomfortably on the expensive leather, waiting for me to yell, to cry, to demand apologies. When I did none of those things, Jamal decided it was his turn to take control of the narrative. He stood up from the sofa, pacing the length of the glass coffee table, trying to project the confident swagger of a successful businessman rather than a desperate man drowning in debt. Look, Tara, we can argue about the past all day, Jamal said, using his hands to emphasize his words. We are a family. Families have misunderstandings. Families make mistakes. But at the end of the day, blood is thicker than water. We stick together when things get tough. He stopped pacing and looked directly at me, deploying his most manipulative brotherly smile. Think about all the times we have been there for you. When you got rejected from that advanced data analytics program right out of college, who took you out for drinks to cheer you up? Me. I have always looked out for you like a real brother. And right now, your big brother needs you to look out for him. I kept my hands resting gently on my lap. Is that so? Yes, Jamal insisted, stepping slightly closer. I am going to be completely transparent with you because we are family. My car dealership is facing a slight temporary cash flow issue. It is nothing major, just some bureaucratic red tape with my inventory suppliers and a few aggressive lenders who do not understand corporate finance. But because of this ridiculous misunderstanding with the cruise line and the police, my accounts are temporarily frozen. I need a quick injection of capital to clear the red tape and save my business. Harrison nodded gravely in agreement. Jamal is right, Tara. The dealership is a cornerstone of this family's financial future. If it goes under, the ripple effect will destroy your sister's livelihood. We need to act as a unified front. Jamal pointed to the manila folder sitting on the table between us. We saw the news, Tara. We know about Michael's patent lawsuit. We know you are sitting on a $22 million settlement. First of all, congratulations. Michael would be so proud. But let us be real. You are a single woman living alone. You do not have children. You do not have a husband anymore. You cannot possibly need or use $22 million by yourself. Vanessa chimed in, her voice dripping with entitlement. Exactly. You have more money than you could ever spend, and your own sister is about to be humiliated in front of our entire social circle because Jamal's business partners are threatening to seize our assets. You owe it to this family to share that wealth. I just need $2 million, Jamal said, naming the outrageous figure without a single ounce of shame. $2 million is absolute pocket change to you right now. It will pay off my aggressive creditors, clear my inventory debts, and get the police off our backs for that cruise ship misunderstanding. It is an investment in your family, Tara. You write me a check today, and we can put all this ugly hospital drama behind us. We can go back to being a happy, loving family. Brenda leaned forward, clasping her hands in a pleading gesture. Please, sweetheart. Your father and I are getting older. We cannot handle the stress of seeing Vanessa lose her home because of Jamal's business trouble. If you truly love us, if you have any gratitude in your heart for the life we gave you, you will do the right thing and help your brother-in-law." They sat there staring at me with hungry, expectant eyes. They had woven a masterful web of guilt, gaslighting, and emotional manipulation. They genuinely believed that by invoking the word family and playing on my past insecurities, I would simply open my checkbook and hand them millions of dollars to fund their fraudulent lifestyles. They thought the battered approval-seeking daughter they had left at the hospital was the same woman sitting across from them now. I slowly reached forward and placed my hand flat on top of the thick manila folder. I looked at Jamal's desperate, sweating face. I looked at Vanessa's greedy, arrogant sneer. I looked at my parents who were willing to sacrifice my sanity to maintain their comfortable illusion of success. "You want $2 million to save your car dealership?" I stated, my voice completely flat. "Yes," Jamal nodded eagerly, practically vibrating with anticipation. "2 million clears everything. It saves the family." I slowly opened the manila folder, revealing the pristine, legally binding documents David had painstakingly compiled for me. I slid the first document across the glass table directly toward Jamal. "That is a fascinating business proposal, Jamal," I said, leaning back into the cushions of my armchair. "However, there is a significant flaw in your financial strategy." "That is a fascinating business proposal, Jamal," I said, leaning back into the cushions of my armchair. "However, there is a significant flaw in your financial strategy." I slid the first document across the glass table directly toward him. It was a thick stack of financial audits and legal filings. "Your company is not facing a temporary cash flow issue, Jamal," I stated, tapping the glossy cover page David's private investigator had compiled. "Your company is completely, legally, and functionally bankrupt. It has been for over a month." Jamal's nervous, brotherly smile vanished entirely. The color drained from his face as he stared at the documents, refusing to touch them as if they were physically burning. "That is a lie. Who gave you those?" "My corporate accounting is strictly private. When you owe multiple federal agencies, the state tax board, and a handful of violent underground creditors, your accounting becomes public record to anyone who pays the right investigators," I replied smoothly. I slid a second document over the glass. "This is a copy of the pending indictment from the State Attorney General. They are charging you with systemic consumer fraud, grand larceny, and racketeering. You have been rolling back odometers on salvaged vehicles, falsifying vehicle titles, and securing predatory loans for elderly customers who did not qualify, only to pocket the massive kickbacks from shady lenders." Vanessa whipped her head around to stare at her husband, her jaw dropping open. "Jamal, what is she talking about? An indictment? You told me business was just slow this quarter." Jamal stammered, wiping a thick bead of sweat from his forehead with the back of his trembling hand. "She is bluffing, Vanessa. It is just a minor compliance audit. Every dealership goes through it. The state is just looking for paperwork errors." "A minor paperwork error does not result in the bank seizing your commercial lot, locking the gates, and impounding your entire remaining inventory, which happened exactly 12 days ago," I corrected him, my voice devoid of any sympathy. "You do not need $2 million to clear red tape. You need $2 million to pay back the dangerous offshore creditors you borrowed from to keep your Ponzi scheme afloat. You also need it to cover the exorbitant 50% weekly interest on the $20,000 you borrowed from local enforcers just last night to post your own bail." Brenda gasped loudly, pressing her hands to her mouth in genuine horror. "Loan sharks. Jamal, you borrowed money from violent criminals. You put our daughter in danger." "It gets much better, Mom," I said, not giving Jamal a single second to recover his footing. I pulled a third document from my manila folder and pushed it to the center of the table. In order to secure that initial massive loan 6 months ago, Jamal used his marital home as collateral. He forged Vanessa's signature on the deed transfer. If he does not pay them back in full by the end of this month, Vanessa loses the house. The bank will not even have to foreclose. The creditors will simply take it. Vanessa leaped to her feet, her face contorted with absolute rage. She turned on Jamal, slapping his shoulder hard enough to make a sharp cracking sound echo in the large room. "You forged my signature. You put our house on the line for your stupid, failing business. You told me that loan document was for a new insurance policy. I was trying to provide for us, Vanessa Jamal shouted back, his carefully constructed suave facade shattering completely into panicked aggression. You are the one demanding $50,000 kitchen renovations, designer handbags every month, and luxury international cruises, while I am drowning in debt, trying to keep up with your lifestyle. Enough, Harrison roared, standing up to physically separate them. He turned his desperate, furious gaze back to me, attempting to salvage the disaster. Tara, this is exactly why you need to write that check right now. Forget the business. Your sister is about to be homeless. She is about to lose everything because of this idiot's mistakes. You have $22 million. You can fix this mess with a single phone call. You are her sister. You owe it to her to protect her. Her sister. I repeated the word, tasting like poison in my mouth. I looked directly at Vanessa, who had stopped hitting Jamal and was now looking at me with wide, pleading eyes. Please, Tara, Vanessa begged instantly, switching back to her practiced victim persona. Her voice trembled perfectly on cue. I did not know about any of this fraud. I am innocent in his schemes. We are sisters. We share the same blood. You know I have always loved you and supported you. I have always been your biggest cheerleader. I let out a short, hollow laugh that held absolutely no humor, echoing coldly in the vast penthouse living room. My biggest cheerleader. That is a very interesting choice of words, Vanessa. Let us talk about your unparalleled sisterly support. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees, fixing Vanessa with a stare so intense it made her physically shrink back into the leather sofa cushions. Do you remember my freshman year of college? I asked, my voice dropping to a low, dangerous register. Do you remember the prestigious National Data Science Scholarship? The one that offered full tuition, a living stipend, and a guaranteed fast-track internship at a top-tier technology firm? Vanessa swallowed hard, her throat bobbing visibly. Her eyes darted to the floor, unable to maintain eye contact. I do not know what you are talking about. That was over a decade ago. Why are you bringing up ancient history? Allow me to refresh your memory, I continued relentlessly. I spent 4 grueling months writing the application portfolio. It was my ticket out of the constant financial anxiety Mom and Dad held over my head. The night before the final submission deadline, I printed the only physical copy required for the courier collection. I left it on the kitchen counter in a sealed envelope ready to be mailed. Brenda frowned, crossing her arms defensively. Tara, why are we talking about some old college application when your sister is about to be thrown out on the street by violent loan sharks? Because context is everything, Mom. I snapped, silencing her instantly with a sharp glare. I turned my attention back to Vanessa. When I woke up the next morning, my envelope was gone. The submission window closed. I lost the scholarship entirely. As a direct result, I had to take out $60,000 in high-interest student loans while working 2 night shifts just to survive my degree program. You misplaced it, Vanessa said quickly, her voice pitching an octave higher in a clear sign of panic. You were always unorganized. Mom even said so. You probably left it at the library. I did not misplace it. I stated, my voice as cold and hard as the marble floor beneath us. I found the shredded pieces of my portfolio stuffed into the bottom of your bathroom trash can 2 days later. You tore it up, Vanessa. You deliberately destroyed my application. Harrison waved his hand dismissively, rolling his eyes. That is a ridiculous accusation. Vanessa would never do something so malicious. Why would she even care about your boring computer scholarship? Because the week before, I answered, turning my icy glare to my father, Vanessa had received her rejection letter from the elite marketing firm she desperately wanted to join. She was failing, and her fragile ego could not stomach the idea of her plain, boring younger sister succeeding while she floundered. So she destroyed my future just to make herself feel superior. That is a lie, Vanessa shouted, though her trembling hands and flushed face betrayed her immense guilt. Is it? I asked, leaning back again. Because 2 years later, when you were blackout drunk at your own engagement party, you bragged about it to your bridesmaid in the venue restroom. You laughed about how incredibly easy it was to keep the ugly duckling in her place. You told her it was a necessary reality check for me to remember my place in the family hierarchy. You simply did not realize I was sitting in the bathroom stall right next to you. The entire room fell into a stunned, suffocating silence. Brenda looked at Vanessa, her mouth slightly open, waiting for a denial that did not come. Vanessa simply stared at her lap, her face turning a deep mottled red, entirely unable to look anyone in the eye, especially me. "You let me think I was going crazy," I said, my voice rising with the accumulated weight of years of suppressed anger and grief. "You let Mom and Dad call me irresponsible, careless, and stupid. You watched me cry myself to sleep from the immense physical stress of working 80-hour weeks to pay my tuition, and you smiled. You built your entire golden child status on the wreckage you deliberately caused in my life." Harrison shook his head, refusing to accept the reality of his favorite child's cruelty. "Siblings fight, Tara. People do stupid things when they are young and jealous. You cannot hold a teenage mistake over her head forever. You still graduated. You still got a job. You are fine." "You are missing the entire point, Dad," I said, pointing a finger at him. "It was never just a mistake. It was a calculated act of sabotage, and it perfectly encapsulates how this family has always operated. You have only ever viewed me as a prop to make Vanessa look better, or a convenient bank account to fund your delusions of grandeur." I stood up from my armchair, towering over them as they sat frozen and pathetic on my expensive furniture. "You do not know the meaning of the word, Sister Vanessa," I declared, my voice echoing off the high ceilings of the penthouse. "And none of you know the meaning of the word family. You are parasites, and the host has finally cut you off." Harrison's face turned an alarming mottled shade of crimson. The last remaining shred of his fabricated corporate dignity vanished, replaced by the ugly, visceral rage of a man who realized he had completely lost control of his most valuable asset. He lunged forward, pointing a trembling finger inches from my face. "How dare you speak to your parents that way?" Harrison bellowed, the veins in his neck bulging against his stiff collar. "We gave you life. We put a roof over your head. We fed you and clothed you when you were nothing but an ungrateful, stubborn child. You owe us respect. You owe us everything you are. You think because you married some dead man with a lucky lawsuit that you can suddenly judge this family. You are going to sit down, write that $2 million check for your brother-in-law, and apologize to your mother right now before I lose my temper entirely." Brenda stood up beside him, her tear-stained face hardening into a mask of pure, undisguised malice. She dropped the weeping mother act, completely revealing the cold, calculating woman underneath. "If you do not help this family today, Tara, I will make sure everyone in this city knows exactly what kind of monster you are," she threatened, her voice dropping to a venomous hiss. "I will call every news outlet. I will go to the press. I will tell them you are a greedy sociopath who hoards millions while your own sister is thrown out into the cold streets. I gave birth to you. That money belongs to this family just as much as it belongs to you. You are legally and morally obligated to share your wealth with the people who raised you." I did not flinch. I did not take a single step back. I looked at the two people who had brought me into this world and felt absolutely nothing but a profound, hollow pity. They were so blinded by their own relentless greed that they fundamentally misunderstood the situation. "You gave me basic biological necessities," I replied, my voice dangerously calm and echoing with absolute finality. "You met the bare minimum legal requirements to not be arrested for child neglect. That does not buy you a lifetime subscription to my bank account, and it certainly does not buy you the right to demand the blood money of my late husband." I took a step forward, forcing Harrison to actually retreat a step to maintain his balance. "Let us talk about Michael. Let us talk about the man who actually loved me unconditionally. The man who stayed up with me at 3 in the morning when I was having panic attacks because of your constant, relentless emotional abuse. Do you remember what you said when he died, Dad? Do you remember standing at his funeral, looking at my husband's casket, and telling me that I should have listened to you and married someone with a real investment portfolio instead of a failed daydreaming inventor?" Harrison's mouth opened, but no words came out. He swallowed hard, suddenly realizing the insurmountable, impenetrable wall he was up against. "And you, Mom?" I continued, turning my razor-sharp gaze to Brenda. "You told me to drop the lawsuit. You called me a grieving lunatic clinging to a pipe dream. You both mocked Michael's genius. You mocked his absolute dedication to his craft. You told me his surgical device was a massive waste of time and that I was dragging down the family name by fighting a $1 billion corporation. That $22 million is not just a lottery ticket. It is Michael's legacy. It is the direct compensation for the extreme stress and the corporate theft that literally caused his fatal stroke. I swept my hand toward the panoramic windows, gesturing to the expansive city skyline below. Every single cent of that settlement represents my husband's brilliant mind and his tragically short life. So let me make this abundantly crystal clear to all of you. I would rather light that entire $22 million on fire and watch the ashes scatter over the ocean than give a single solitary penny to the people who mocked his life and abandoned his widow to bleed out in an intensive care unit. Vanessa let out a loud, frustrated scream, stamping her foot on the imported marble floor like a spoiled toddler throwing a massive tantrum. But we are going to lose the house. We are going to lose the luxury cars. Jamal's creditors are going to destroy us. What are we supposed to do? You are going to do exactly what you told me to do at the airport when you stole my credit cards, I said, offering her a chilling, triumphant smile. You are going to figure it out. Or maybe you can use your impressive networking skills to negotiate a payment plan with your violent loan sharks. Either way, your survival is no longer my problem. Harrison raised his fist, his anger boiling over into pure, unchecked aggression. You selfish, ungrateful little wretch. I will not leave this room until you transfer those funds. I am your father, and I am ordering you to comply right this second. I simply reached into the pocket of my cashmere cardigan and pulled out a small, sleek black remote control that David's security team had provided me upon moving in. I pressed the bright red button right in the center. You are not my father, I stated firmly, my voice ringing with total closure. You are just a man who happens to share my genetics, and you are officially trespassing on private property. Less than 5 seconds later, the heavy oak doors of the penthouse burst open with a loud bang. Officer Davis stepped into the expansive living room, flanked by 4 massive, heavily armed private security guards. They moved with terrifying speed and military precision, instantly surrounding my family and cutting off any avenue of approach toward me. Miss Tara, Officer Davis said, his hand resting casually on his utility belt, his eyes locked onto Harrison. Do you need these individuals removed from the premises? Yes, Officer Davis, I replied, turning my back on my family and walking casually toward the custom kitchen to pour myself another cup of chamomile tea. They were just leaving. And please ensure their biometric profiles and vehicle license plates are permanently blacklisted from the building database. If they ever step foot on the property line again, I want them arrested for trespassing immediately. Harrison started to shout a string of profanities, but one of the massive security guards stepped squarely into his personal space, using his sheer physical size to back my father toward the waiting elevator. Sir, it is time to leave. We will not ask nicely a second time. Move. Brenda began to wail again, reaching her trembling arms out toward my turned back as the guards physically herded her backward. Tara, please, do not do this to your own mother. You cannot just throw us away like garbage. We need you. Vanessa and Jamal were utterly silent, completely paralyzed by the overwhelming presence of the armed guards. They allowed themselves to be corralled into the elevator cab like defeated, terrified animals. The false bravado was entirely gone. The sheer entitlement was shattered into a million pieces. They were finally realizing the absolute finality of their own destruction. I stood at the kitchen island watching the entire scene unfold in the reflection of the floor-to-ceiling glass windows. I did not turn around. I did not offer them a single final glance or a word of farewell. The heavy steel doors of the private elevator slid shut with a definitive mechanical click, instantly cutting off Brenda's frantic, echoing sobs and Harrison's muffled, impotent shouting. The penthouse plunged back into a deep, luxurious, and beautiful silence. I took a slow sip of my warm tea, looking out over the sprawling city. The storm had finally passed. The toxic anchors that had weighed me down my entire existence had been completely severed. I was bruised and I was still healing physically, but for the first time in 32 years, I was completely, undeniably free. The peace lasted exactly 4 days. For 96 hours, I existed in a state of absolute uninterrupted tranquility inside the secured walls of my penthouse. I focused entirely on my physical recovery, working through gentle stretching routines, and enjoying the profound silence that only comes when toxic elements are finally excised from your life. I honestly believe they had retreated to lick their wounds and figure out how to navigate their impending financial ruin. I should have known better. Parasites do not simply walk away when they are cut off from their host. They adapt and they find a new way to feed. The illusion of quiet was broken on a Thursday morning when my secure phone rang. It was David. I answered immediately, expecting a routine update on the blind trust, or perhaps a progress report on the dossier he was compiling regarding my brother-in-law's failing car dealership. "Have you checked social media this morning?" David asked, his voice entirely devoid of its usual professional detachment. It sounded strained, laced with a heavy, urgent caution. I set down my coffee mug, instantly alert. No. I deleted all my primary accounts years ago to stop my mother from tracking my movements. Why? What did they do? David sighed heavily. Your sister just launched a highly coordinated, incredibly vicious digital smear campaign against you. It is currently going viral across multiple platforms. She has weaponized the settlement money, and she is using every manipulative tactic in the book to destroy your public image. I am sending you a secure link now. Prepare yourself, Tara. It is entirely unhinged. My tablet chimed with an incoming encrypted message. I opened the link David provided, which redirected me to a popular short-form video platform. The video taking up my screen already had over 2 million views, hundreds of thousands of likes, and a comment section that was moving too fast to read. The video began with a tight, intimate shot of Vanessa sitting on a modest beige sofa. She was wearing no makeup, a stark contrast to her usual heavily contoured appearance, and her hair was tied back in a messy bun. She wore an oversized faded sweater that looked like it had been purchased at a thrift store, deliberately projecting an image of sudden, unexpected poverty. She was looking directly into the camera, her eyes wide and glistening with manufactured unshed tears. "Hi, everyone," Vanessa began, her voice trembling with perfectly rehearsed fragility. "I never thought I would have to make a video like this. I have always believed that family matters should stay private, but my family is in immediate danger, and I have nowhere else to turn." She paused, taking a shaky breath, pressing a tissue against her dry cheek. My younger sister recently received a massive multi-million-dollar settlement from the tragic passing of her husband. We were all so happy for her. We thought this money would bring her peace. Instead, it turned her into a monster. The camera angle widened slightly, revealing Brenda and Harrison sitting on the edges of the sofa beside her. They looked incredibly frail, their shoulders slumped, their expressions a masterclass in fabricated despair. Harrison was staring blankly at the floor, while Brenda clutched a crumpled tissue, shaking her head slowly as if the betrayal was too much to bear. "My parents gave up everything to raise us," Vanessa continued, her voice cracking expertly. "They sacrificed their entire lives to make sure my sister had a good education and a safe home." And how did she repay them? The moment she got her millions, she legally evicted our elderly parents from their home. She bought the debt on their house through a shell company and threw them out onto the street without a single penny. They are currently sleeping on an air mattress in my tiny apartment, and we are terrified of what she will do next. The blatant, audacious lies made my blood boil, but I forced myself to remain completely still and watch the rest. Vanessa was not finished. She leaned closer to the camera, her expression shifting from sorrow to righteous, protective anger. "But the worst part is what she did to my husband, Jamal," Vanessa whispered, her voice dropping to a dramatic, serious register. The camera panned slightly to show Jamal standing in the background, looking out a window with his hands in his pockets, the very picture of a defeated, broken man. "Jamal is a hardworking, self-made African-American business owner," Vanessa stated, making sure to emphasize his race to hit the exact demographic triggers she was aiming for. "He built his car dealership from the ground up, despite all the systemic obstacles in his way. My sister has always harbored deep, prejudiced resentment toward him. She hated seeing a black man succeed in our family. So using her new billions, she hired corrupt investigators to fabricate fraud charges against him. She literally called the police on an innocent black man and tried to have him locked up simply because she hates him. She is using her immense wealth to destroy a minority-owned business and ruin our lives out of pure racist spite. The video ended with Vanessa burying her face in her hands, sobbing loudly, while Brenda rubbed her back in a display of tragic family solidarity. I sat back on my sofa, the tablet resting on my lap. As a medical data analyst, my brain was wired to detach from emotion and assess raw information. I did not cry. I did not throw the tablet across the room. I looked at the metrics. The engagement rate was astronomical. The internet absolutely loves a victim. But more than that, the internet loves a wealthy, corrupt villain to hate. Vanessa had expertly hit every single algorithmic sweet spot. She had elderly abuse, unimaginable wealth inequality, and a devastating accusation of racial prejudice. It was a digital masterpiece of character assassination. I scrolled through the top comments. Thousands of strangers were demanding my full name. They were trying to track down my employer, completely unaware that I was financially independent. They were calling me a racist, a sociopath, and a monster. Even worse, Vanessa had pinned a comment to the top of the video containing a link to a crowdfunding campaign. The campaign was titled, "Save My Family from My Billionaire Sister," and it had already raised over $40,000 from gullible, sympathetic strangers. She was using this digital witch hunt to literally crowdfund the money she owed her violent loan sharks. I picked up my secure phone and brought David back off hold. "Did you watch it?" David asked, his tone indicating he was already preparing legal countermeasures. "I have a team drafting a cease and desist order right now. We can file an emergency injunction for defamation and libel. She is raising funds under false pretenses, which constitutes wire fraud. We can have that platform take the video down by noon." "No," I said sharply, my analytical mind locking onto a much more destructive strategy. "Do not issue a cease and desist. Do not contact the platform. Do not do a single thing to stop that video from spreading." David paused, clearly confused by my directive. "Tara, she is actively destroying your reputation. She is inciting a digital mob against you. If we let this sit, people will believe it is the truth." "Let them believe it," I replied, a cold, calculating smile touching my lips. "Let her go on every morning talk show that will have her. Let her raise $100,000 on that fraudulent campaign. Let her feel completely, untouchably victorious." I stood up from the sofa and walked over to the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking down at the bustling city below. Vanessa thinks she is playing a game of public opinion. She thinks because she can manipulate strangers on the internet, she has somehow backed me into a corner. But she has just handed me the exact rope I need to hang them all permanently. David's voice shifted, catching the dangerous edge in my tone. "What exactly are you planning, Tara?" "I want you to draft a formal invitation to a mediation settlement," I instructed. "Make it look incredibly official. Tell them that the public pressure has become too much for me to bear. Tell them I am willing to sit down and sign over a significant portion of the settlement money to save my reputation, but it has to be done in person, in a neutral, highly public location." "You want to surrender to them?" David asked, incredulous. "I want them to think I am surrendering," I corrected him. "I want them to put on their best clothes, walk into a fancy restaurant, and sit across from me believing they have won. Because when the trap finally snaps shut, I want to make sure they lose absolutely everything in front of an audience. Send the invitation, David. It is time to finish this." The digital storm that followed Vanessa's video was a masterclass in modern mob mentality. Within 24 hours, the video had crossed 10 million views. My encrypted tablet pinged relentlessly with alerts from David's cybersecurity team, detailing the escalating severity of the backlash. Strangers who knew absolutely nothing about my life were dedicating hours to tearing it apart. They attempted to dox me, posting fake addresses and outdated phone numbers. They flooded the reviews of Michael's old engineering firm with vicious one-star ratings, demanding the company revoke the settlement. The crowdfunding campaign Vanessa had linked was skyrocketing, passing $80,000 as sympathetic viewers emptied their wallets to save my supposedly destitute family. Through it all, I maintained an absolute impenetrable silence. In the age of immediate digital gratification, where everyone expects a tearful apology video or a furious social media rebuttal, my silence drove the internet absolutely insane. Media outlets began picking up the story, running sensationalized segments about the greedy widow hiding in her luxury tower while her elderly parents slept on the floor. Pundits debated my psychological profile on morning talk shows. Every single attempt to bait me into a public response failed. I did not issue a press release. I did not hire a crisis management public relations firm. I simply sat in the quiet, temperature-controlled sanctuary of my penthouse office, watching them dig their own graves deeper with every passing hour. My dining room table had been completely transformed into a tactical war room. David and his team of forensic accountants had spent the last 3 days mapping out every single vulnerability my family possessed. We were not just preparing a legal defense, we were orchestrating an absolute financial and legal annihilation. I sat across from David, sipping a glass of sparkling water, examining a stack of heavily redacted documents. "We have secured the secondary mortgage on your parents' house," David confirmed, sliding a thick blue folder toward me. When Harrison and Brenda fled the state to avoid their creditors 5 years ago, they signed a broad power of attorney and transferred the deed to a holding company to avoid asset seizure. That holding company was quietly liquidated last week. "We swept in and purchased the debt through your blind trust. You are now legally the primary lien holder on the property Vanessa claims you maliciously stole. You did not steal it. You literally own it." I opened the folder, tracing my finger over the signatures, feeling a cold satisfaction. "And the eviction process fully authorized and ready to execute." David replied, a sharp smile touching his lips. "The moment you give the signal, the local sheriff will serve the final notice. But that is just the beginning." David pulled a second, much thicker red folder from his briefcase. This was the centerpiece of our operation, the absolute destruction of Jamal's fraudulent empire. I opened the file, reviewing the meticulous paper trail the private investigators had uncovered. "Jamal's creditors are no longer just impatient loan sharks," David explained, tapping a specific financial ledger. His desperate attempt to move funds and hide the $20,000 bail money triggered a massive red flag in the federal banking system. We forwarded our investigative dossier directly to our contacts at the Federal Bureau of Investigation and the Internal Revenue Service. They have been quietly building a racketeering and wire fraud case against his dealership for months. Our evidence of his offshore borrowing and odometer tampering was the exact catalyst they needed to finalize the indictments. I looked up at David, the magnitude of the trap finally crystallizing into a perfect, inescapable reality. "So they are ready," David nodded, leaning back in his chair, folding his hands together. "The authorities are entirely on board. They have agreed to hold off on executing the arrest warrants until the mediation meeting. They want to catch Jamal in a controlled environment away from his dealership where he might attempt to destroy evidence or flee. The IRS agents will be waiting in the wings to serve the asset seizure notices simultaneously." It was a flawless, terrifyingly efficient mechanism of consequence. Vanessa thought she was playing a game of public perception, manipulating emotions on social media to extort me. She had no comprehension of the very real, very legal avalanches currently suspended directly over her head. "What about the mediation setup?" I asked, closing the red folder and pushing it back across the smooth glass table. "Do they believe I am surrendering?" They took the bait instantly. David laughed, shaking his head at their sheer arrogance. When I delivered the mediation invitation, Harrison tried to negotiate the venue, demanding we meet at an exclusive high-end restaurant downtown to ensure a public setting. He thinks a public venue protects them and forces you to maintain decorum. He genuinely believes the internet pressure broke you and you are bringing a massive check to make the bad press go away. I stood up from the table, walking toward the window to look out over the city one last time before the final act. They had demanded a public spectacle. They had used the internet to humiliate me, to drag my husband's legacy through the mud, and to paint themselves as innocent martyrs. They wanted an audience for my supposed defeat. "Confirm the reservation," I said to David, my voice echoing with absolute uncompromising resolve. "Let us give them exactly the audience they asked for." Across town, inside the cramped, aggressively decorated living room of Vanessa and Jamal's rented apartment, the atmosphere was a sickening cocktail of desperation and forced extravagance. The air conditioning was broken, but Vanessa refused to open the windows, claiming the street noise would ruin the aesthetic of her next live stream. She was currently pacing the floor, obsessively refreshing the analytics on her viral video. The view count had just crossed 12 million. "We broke her!" Vanessa announced, her voice shrill with manic triumph as she shoved her phone into Jamal's face. "Look at the engagement metrics. The entire internet wants her head on a spike. People are literally offering to protest outside of Michael's old company. We completely destroyed her life." Jamal did not look up from his own phone, where he was frantically dodging calls from unlisted numbers. He rubbed his bloodshot eyes, the heavy bags underneath them, betraying the sheer terror of owing violent men $20,000. "Yeah, well, internet points do not pay the loan sharks, Vanessa. I need cash. If we do not get a check in our hands by the end of the week, those guys are going to break my kneecaps. I cannot run a dealership from a wheelchair." Before Vanessa could launch into another tirade about his financial incompetence, a sharp knock at the apartment door startled them all. Harrison, who had been sitting on the beige sofa massaging his temples, stood up cautiously. He peered through the peephole, his tense shoulders immediately dropping in relief. "It is a legal courier," Harrison said quickly, unlocking the deadbolt and pulling the door open. A delivery worker in a crisp uniform handed him a thick premium ivory envelope sealed with the embossed crest of David's law firm. Harrison signed for it with a flourish, his chest puffing out as he brought the package into the living room. Brenda practically leaped off the sofa, her eyes wide with predatory hunger. "Open it, Harrison! Open it right now! Tell me that ungrateful brat finally cracked!" Harrison tore the thick paper open, extracting a stack of heavy watermarked legal documents. He adjusted his reading glasses, scanning the first page with rapid precision. As his eyes darted across the formal legal jargon, a slow, incredibly smug smile spread across his face. The tension that had been suffocating the apartment for the past 2 weeks vanished instantly, replaced by a suffocating wave of pure, unjustified arrogance. "She surrendered," Harrison announced, tossing the document onto the glass coffee table like a winning lottery ticket. He let out a loud, booming laugh that sounded more like a bark. "It is an official invitation to a binding financial mediation. Her lawyer states that the public scrutiny has caused her severe emotional distress and irreparable reputational damage. She is offering to sign over a significant portion of the settlement trust to us in exchange for a binding non-disclosure agreement and a public retraction of the video." Vanessa shrieked, actually jumping up and down on the cheap rug. "I knew it. I told you my strategy would work. I played the internet like a fiddle." She could not handle the heat. The moment she saw people calling her a racist monster, she folded like a cheap lawn chair. "I am an absolute genius." Jamal let out a massive sigh of relief, dropping his phone onto the couch. His entire demeanor shifted back to the arrogant, fast-talking hustler he pretended to be. He clapped his hands together, pacing the room with renewed aggressive energy. "Significant portion. That is what the paper says. We are not settling for pennies, Harrison. I need at least 4 million just to clear my dealership debts and get my inventory out of impound, plus another million for the emotional damage she caused us by getting us locked up in that filthy precinct. We are holding all the cards. We demand 5 million minimum, or the video stays up forever." Brenda nodded vigorously, already mentally spending the extorted funds. 5 million is just the starting point, Jamal. She owes us for everything. "Harrison, I want my house back. I want the deed free and clear, and Vanessa needs a proper estate, not this claustrophobic rental. We are going to walk into that mediation and dictate terms to her like she is a disobedient child. She will beg us to take her money just to make the internet stop hating her." Harrison picked up the second page of the document, his smug smile widening into a predatory grin. "She even capitulated on the venue. I demanded a neutral, high-end public location to ensure she could not pull any of her security guard stunts again." Her lawyer booked the private VIP dining room at the Sovereign for tomorrow evening. It is the most exclusive restaurant in the financial district. They require a strict formal dress code. Perfect, Vanessa declared, rushing toward her overstuffed closet. We are going to walk into that restaurant looking like absolute royalty. We need to project total dominance. She needs to look at us and realize she never stood a chance against this family. Jamal, get your best suit out. Mom, wear the pearls. We are not just going there to collect a check. We are going there to make her grovel. The four of them spent the rest of the evening in a state of euphoric delusion. They completely ignored the eviction notices stacked on the kitchen counter. Jamal ignored the threatening text messages from his underground creditors. Brenda and Harrison ignored the fact that they were legally homeless and surviving on the charity of their bankrupt son-in-law. They dressed themselves in their finest dry-cleaned designer clothing, spraying expensive cologne and perfume to mask the stench of their own desperation. They looked at themselves in the mirror, entirely convinced of their own supremacy. They genuinely believed that a viral video and a few fake tears had conquered a woman holding $22 million and a team of ruthless corporate litigators. They had no idea that the invitation in their hands was not a white flag of surrender. It was a gilded, formalized execution warrant. They were cheerfully dressing up in their absolute best clothes, thoroughly preparing to walk straight into their own spectacular slaughter. The Sovereign was the crown jewel of the financial district, a towering monument to old money and quiet power. Jamal pulled his leased SUV, the one currently 3 months behind on payments, and actively dodging repo men up to the valet stand with the screeching tires of a man who believed he owned the city. He tossed the keys to the attendant with a crumpled $10 bill, completely ignoring the valet's look of barely concealed contempt. Vanessa stepped out of the vehicle, adjusting the lapels of a heavily logoed designer blazer she had purchased using a maxed-out credit card just hours before the cruise. She inhaled the crisp evening air, her chest puffing with supreme validation. Brenda and Harrison followed, both wearing vintage couture pulled from the back of their closets, smelling faintly of mothballs, dry cleaning chemicals, and desperate ambition. To the untrained eye, they looked like a wealthy family arriving for a celebratory dinner. But beneath the silk and tailored wool, they were four desperate grifters drowning in a sea of catastrophic debt, marching blindly into a meticulously designed cage. They approached the heavy mahogany double doors of the restaurant, flanked by stoic doormen who opened them in perfect synchronization. The interior of the Sovereign was a masterclass in intimidation. Dark wood paneling, low ambient lighting, and the hushed melodic clinking of crystal glasses created an atmosphere of exclusive privilege. Harrison strode directly to the maitre d's podium, leaning heavily on the polished mahogany. "We are here for the private mediation," Harrison announced, his voice booming slightly louder than necessary, ensuring the nearby tables of wealthy patrons could hear him. "The reservation is under Vance Legal Associates. We are the expected beneficiaries." The maitre d' did not bat an eye at the arrogant display. He simply checked his leather-bound ledger and offered a crisp, professional nod. "Right this way, sir. The VIP dining room has been prepared for your party." They followed the host through the main dining room, their heads held high. Vanessa actually smirked at a group of women dining nearby, completely convinced that by the end of the night, her bank account would dwarf theirs. Jamal checked his reflection in a mirrored pillar, adjusting his tie and practicing his most intimidating boardroom scowl. He was fully prepared to demand $5 million and not a penny less. He had even drafted a mental list of the exact exotic sports cars he was going to buy once the check cleared. The host guided them to the back of the establishment, stopping before a set of soundproof frosted glass doors. He pushed them open, revealing a breathtaking private dining space. The room featured a massive solid oak conference table, plush leather seating, and floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the glittering city skyline. A private bar was stationed in the corner, fully stocked with top-shelf liquor. However, the room was completely empty. "Excellent," Brenda declared, sweeping into the room and immediately claiming the large armchair at the head of the table. "She wants us to get comfortable. Jamal, pour me a glass of that expensive Cabernet. If my ungrateful daughter is paying the bill tonight, I am drinking the absolute best they have." Jamal eagerly moved to the private bar, pouring generous measures of wine and scotch for the group. He took a long, greedy swallow of the liquor, letting the burn numb the terrifying reality of the loan sharks waiting for his call. In his mind, the violent men threatening to break his legs were already a thing of the past. He was a millionaire now by association. We need to make sure the non-disclosure agreement heavily favors us, Harrison instructed, adopting the tone of a seasoned legal expert, despite having not read a single law book in his life. She signs the money over first, then we sign the NDA. And make sure the lawyer knows we are not paying any of his ridiculous retainer fees out of our cut. That comes out of her end. Obviously, Brenda agreed, running her hand lovingly over the polished oak table. And Vanessa, make sure you record audio on your phone just in case she tries to pull any of her manipulative stunts. We need leverage if she tries to back out of the transfer. Way ahead of you, Mom, Vanessa smirked, placing her phone face up on the table next to her wine glass. I want to catch the exact moment her voice cracks. It is going to be the most satisfying sound I have ever heard. I bet she walks in here looking like a beaten dog. I actually bet she begs us to forgive her. Let her cry, Harrison said coldly, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. Tears do not add zeros to the settlement check. We stay firm. We demand the $5 million, the house deed, and a legally binding public apology on her social media. If she hesitates for even a single second, we remind her that the internet is ready to absolutely destroy whatever is left of her pathetic reputation. They clinked their glasses together in the center of the table, a toast to their own perceived brilliance. They sat in that luxurious, soundproof room, drinking expensive alcohol entirely consumed by their delusions of grandeur. They were so busy counting the millions they believed they had extorted, they never noticed the heavy frosted glass doors clicking shut and locking from the outside. They never noticed the sudden chilling finality of the silence that followed. They were exactly where I needed them to be. 10 minutes passed, then 20. The initial adrenaline rush of their perceived victory began to settle into a restless, agitated impatience. Jamal paced the length of the room, his expensive leather shoes sinking into the thick carpet. He checked the gold watch strapped to his wrist, a cheap counterfeit he wore to project a level of wealth he absolutely did not possess. She is making us wait on purpose, Jamal grumbled, pouring himself a third glass of scotch from the private bar. It is a pathetic power play. She wants to show us she still has some control. Let her play her little games. When she finally walks through those doors, I am adding another 100,000 to the demand just for wasting my time. Vanessa did not look up from her phone. She was busy adjusting the lighting on a selfie she had just snapped, holding her crystal wine glass up to catch the glimmer of the chandelier. She typed out a caption with rapid, aggressive taps. Celebrating ultimate justice tonight, karma always comes for the greedy. She posted the picture to her social media feed, smiling as the notifications instantly began to flood her screen. Her followers, completely ignorant of the actual situation, were praising her resilience and begging for updates. Let her stall, Vanessa sneered, tossing the phone back onto the oak table. Every minute she makes us wait is another million views on my video. She is bleeding public support by the second. She knows she is walking into a slaughter. She is probably in the restroom down the hall, trying to stop hyperventilating. Harrison unbuttoned his suit jacket and leaned back in his leather chair, steepling his fingers in front of his chest. He was practicing the exact posture he intended to use to establish total dominance over the negotiation. When the door opens, nobody says a word, Harrison commanded, looking around the table to ensure his family understood the strategy. Silence is the ultimate weapon in corporate mediation. We let her sit down. We let her lay the settlement documents on the table. We do not speak until she offers a formal verbal apology. If she tries to justify her actions or defend that dead husband of hers, Jamal, you stand up and pretend we are walking out. Harrison even began to criticize Michael's surgical device again, claiming he could have negotiated a much higher settlement if the corporation had dealt with a real businessman instead of an emotional widow. Brenda nodded enthusiastically, taking a delicate sip of her Cabernet. And I will remind her that the press is waiting for my exclusive interview tomorrow morning. I already have the script memorized. A heartbroken mother forced to hold her cruel billionaire daughter accountable. The morning shows will eat it up. We will have her completely cornered before she even opens her mouth to speak. The air in the VIP room was thick with their toxic, suffocating arrogance. They were essentially dividing the spoils of a war they had already lost. Jamal began openly listing the exotic sports cars he planned to import the moment the funds cleared, debating the merits of a Lamborghini over a Ferrari. Vanessa was loudly calculating the cost of moving into a penthouse in my exact building solely for the malicious pleasure of sharing an elevator bank with me and flaunting her extorted wealth. They were so deeply entrenched in their echo chamber of greed that the passage of time lost its meaning. 30 minutes dragged into 45. The heavy soundproofing of the room blocked out the ambient noise of the bustling restaurant, isolating them entirely. They were swimming in a fishbowl of their own delusion, completely insulated from the devastating reality, waiting just on the other side of the frosted glass. Then the heavy brass handle of the double doors finally clicked. The sharp metallic sound echoed loudly in the quiet room. Instantly, the four of them snapped into action. Jamal practically threw his scotch glass onto the bar cart and rushed to stand imposingly behind Vanessa's chair. Brenda straightened her spine, pasting a look of cold maternal disappointment across her face. Harrison puffed out his chest, narrowing his eyes and perfecting his boardroom glare. Vanessa picked up her phone, her thumb hovering over the record button, ready to capture the exact moment of my ultimate humiliation. They held their breath, their eyes locked on the frosted glass, anticipating the arrival of a broken, weeping woman clutching a surrender document. They stood there, the very picture of manufactured superiority, waiting for a victim that was never going to arrive. The heavy frosted glass doors swung open smoothly, but I did not walk in alone, and I certainly did not look like a broken, weeping victim. I wore a tailored crimson suit that projected absolute uncompromising authority. I stepped into the private dining room with my head held high, my posture radiating the kind of terrifying power that only comes from holding every single winning card in the deck. Flanking me was not just David, my imposing corporate litigator, but a highly coordinated entourage of severe-looking professionals who instantly sucked all the oxygen out of the luxurious space. To my right stood two large men in sharp, unbranded dark suits. They had thick necks, calloused hands, and cold, unblinking eyes that screamed underground violence. To my left stood a woman in a sterile, impeccably pressed gray pantsuit, holding a leather briefcase adorned with the official seal of the federal government. Harrison's grand strategy of intimidating silence collapsed in a fraction of a second. His mouth dropped open, but his carefully rehearsed domineering speech died completely in his throat. Vanessa's thumb froze over the record button on her phone, her smug smirk melting into an expression of sheer, unadulterated panic. Brenda shrank back into the large leather armchair, her fingers gripping the mahogany armrest so tightly her knuckles turned bone white. But Jamal was the one who truly broke. The moment his eyes locked onto the two large men in the unbranded suits, all the blood rushed from his face, leaving him a sickly ashen gray. He let out a strangled, breathless sound and stumbled backward, colliding heavily with the private bar cart. He knocked over his expensive glass of scotch, sending it crashing to the floor. The crystal shattered loudly, the amber liquid pooling around his expensive leather shoes. "You requested a formal mediation," I announced, my voice cutting through the thick, panicked tension like a surgical blade. "So I brought the necessary parties to finalize our business." I did not pull out a chair. I did not sit down. I remained standing at the opposite end of the long oak table, forcing them to look up at me from their seats. "Allow me to introduce my associates," I continued, smoothly gesturing to the people standing behind me. "You already know my attorney, David. The woman to my left is Agent Miller from the Internal Revenue Service Criminal Investigation Division. And the gentlemen to my right are representatives for the underground lending syndicate you frantically contacted last night, Jamal. They were surprisingly easy to locate once my forensic accountants traced the origin of your $20,000 bail payment." Jamal's knees completely gave out. He collapsed into the chair behind him, gasping for air as if he were drowning. He tried to speak, to offer some kind of excuse, but only a pathetic, high-pitched wheeze escaped his trembling lips. The loan sharks did not say a single word. They simply stared down at him with dead, predatory eyes, their silent presence infinitely more terrifying than any verbal threat could ever be. Harrison finally found his voice. though it lacked any of its usual booming patriarchal resonance. Tara, what is the meaning of this? You told us you were ready to settle. We came here in good faith to negotiate the division of the settlement. You cannot bring these people into a private family matter. There is no family matter left to discuss, Dad, I replied. I walked to the edge of the table, picked up Vanessa's phone, and casually tapped the screen, permanently deleting her pending social media draft. You demanded $5 million. You threatened to ruin my life with a fabricated viral video. Vanessa went on the internet and cried to 12 million strangers about how I maliciously stole the roof over her head. I figured if I was going to be publicly accused of being a ruthless property-stealing monster, I should probably live up to the title. I gestured for David, who stepped forward and snapped open his pristine leather briefcase. He extracted a thick, legally binding file stamped with heavy red ink and tossed it directly onto the center of the oak table. The heavy thud made Brenda flinch visibly. That is the deed and the secondary mortgage paperwork for the house you currently live in, Vanessa, I explained, watching my sister's arrogant designer-clad facade crumble into absolute horror. Jamal used your marital home as collateral to secure a massive high-interest loan for his failing dealership. When he defaulted, the bank sold his toxic debt to a private holding firm. While you were busy filming yourself crying on a beige sofa and begging strangers for money, my legal team was busy purchasing that exact holding firm. I leaned forward, resting my hands flat on the polished wood, closing the physical distance between us, to deliver the final crushing blow. I bought your bad debt, Vanessa. I own your mortgage. I own the 4 walls you sleep in, the roof over your head, and every single fixture inside it. And because Jamal missed his final grace period payment 48 hours ago, the property is officially in default. Vanessa scrambled to grab the file, her perfectly manicured hands shaking violently as she flipped through the dense legal pages. She saw the bank seals, the transfer of ownership, and finally my name listed in bold print as the primary lien holder. No, Vanessa gasped, tears of genuine, unfiltered panic welling in her eyes. You cannot do this. We have tenant rights. We have a family. You cannot just throw us onto the street. We will take you to court. You do not have tenant rights when the house is seized for gross financial default and commercial fraud. David interjected, his voice dripping with professional disdain. The eviction notice has already been processed and expedited by the county clerk. As we speak, a specialized property management team is changing the locks on the exterior doors and moving your personal belongings into temporary storage boxes on the front curb. Brenda leaped out of her armchair, reaching her hands across the table toward me in a desperate, pleading gesture. Tara, please. You have made your point. You terrified us. We are sorry for the video. We will take it down right now. Just give Vanessa her house back. You have $22 million. You do not need that property. We will sign the non-disclosure agreement for free. Just let us go back to the way things were. The way things were is exactly what I am destroying today, I stated, my voice echoing with unyielding finality. You used the internet to paint me as a villain who ruthlessly evicts her own family. I am simply bringing your fictional narrative to life. I do not want an apology, Mom. I do not want a non-disclosure agreement. I want you to feel the exact same helpless, terrifying vulnerability I felt when you left me bleeding in that hospital bed. I turned my gaze away from my mother's trembling form and locked eyes with Jamal. He was still slumped against the bar cart, clutching his chest, as if trying to physically hold his panic inside. I nodded toward the woman in the gray suit standing to my left. Agent Miller is not just here to audit your failing business, Jamal, I said, my tone shifting to absolute clinical precision. She is here acting as a liaison for a joint federal task force. Agent Miller stepped forward, opening her briefcase. She did not raise her voice, but her professional authority commanded the room. Mr. Jamal. She began, stating his name with chilling formality. The Internal Revenue Service, in conjunction with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, has been tracking your dealership's financial anomalies for the past 14 months. We have irrefutable evidence of systematic money laundering, wire fraud, and the trafficking of stolen vehicles across state lines. You have been using the dealership as a front to wash illicit funds for the very men standing across the room from you. Jamal let out a pathetic, high-pitched whine. He looked wildly at the two massive enforcers, who simply stared back with dead, unblinking eyes. They knew the federal agents were closing in, and they were only here today to ensure Jamal handed over every last liquid asset he had before the government froze his accounts permanently. "You thought you were a mastermind?" I continued, stepping closer to the broken man. "You thought you could juggle predatory loans, fake vehicle identification numbers, and federal tax evasion without leaving a digital footprint. But you left an absolute canyon of evidence. I simply funded the forensic accountants who gathered it all and hand-delivered it to the FBI. The subpoenas have already been served to your business partners. Your lot is locked down by federal agents right now. You are not walking out of this restaurant to go home, Jamal. You are walking out of here straight into federal custody." Vanessa let out a blood-curdling shriek, lunging toward her husband and beating her fists against his chest. "You idiot!" she screamed, her face contorted in absolute rage. "You ruined us! You lied to me! You told me you were a legitimate businessman. Now I am homeless and married to a felon." Jamal tried to push her away, weeping openly, entirely stripped of his false swagger. "I did it for you," he sobbed. "You demanded the lifestyle. You demanded the luxury bags and the vacations. I had to keep the money flowing." I watched them tear each other apart for a fleeting moment before shifting my focus to the two people who had created this toxic environment in the first place. Harrison and Brenda were huddled together on the leather sofa, watching the destruction of their golden child's marriage with wide, terrified eyes. Harrison pulled his suit jacket tighter around his shoulders, attempting to salvage a final shred of his patriarchal dignity. "Well?" Harrison stammered, his voice lacking any of its usual booming resonance. "Jamal made his bed, and he has to lie in it. That has nothing to do with us. We are your parents, Tara. You have made your point with Vanessa, but you cannot possibly intend to leave us out in the cold. We still have our house. We will go back home and leave you in peace." I actually smiled at that. It was a cold, sharp expression that made Harrison physically recoil. "Your house," I repeated, letting the words hang in the heavy air of the VIP dining room. "You mean the beautiful, sprawling suburban estate that you proudly flaunt to your country club friends? The one you use to project an image of generational wealth and untouchable success?" "Yes," Brenda said, her voice shaking with desperate hope. "Our home. The home you grew up in." David stepped forward, holding a new, perfectly crisp legal document. He placed it deliberately on the table right next to the paperwork that had just destroyed Vanessa's life. "5 years ago, I stated, pacing slowly around the edge of the massive oak table, you made a series of catastrophic investments. You were drowning in commercial debt, Harrison. Creditors were circling, threatening to seize everything you owned. To protect your precious estate from liquidation, you executed a brilliant, cowardly legal maneuver. You signed a comprehensive power of attorney and transferred the deed of your home into a blind shell company, effectively hiding your primary asset from the people you owed money to." Harrison's face turned the color of wet ash. He swallowed hard, his eyes darting frantically toward the door. "You thought you were so clever hiding behind corporate loopholes," I continued relentlessly. "But shell companies can be bought, Dad. And power of attorney documents, when executed to avoid debt, create massive legal vulnerabilities. My legal team tracked down the holding firm you used to hide your property. Since you had legally signed away your direct ownership to evade your creditors, the holding firm was the absolute legal owner of the estate. And last Thursday, my trust purchased that holding firm in its entirety." Brenda let out a sharp, breathless gasp, clutching her chest as if she were having a heart attack. "No. No, Harrison, tell her she is lying. Tell her she cannot take our home." "I am not taking it, Mom," I corrected her, my voice dropping to a terrifyingly calm register. "I am simply liquidating a corporate asset. You signed away your rights to that house 5 years ago. You have been living there essentially as squatters in your own fraudulent scheme. Because I now own the shell company, I executed my legal right to sell the property to a commercial developer. The sale was finalized this morning." Harrison leaped to his feet, his hands shaking violently as he pointed a finger at me. "You cannot do this. We have nowhere to go. We have no savings. You are leaving us with absolutely nothing." I looked at the man who had called me an embarrassment, who had mocked my late husband's life's work, and who had gleefully spent my money while I lay bleeding in a hospital. You left me with a $50 bill and a ruptured spleen, I said, delivering the final crushing verdict. I am leaving you with exactly what you have earned. Nothing. The commercial developers have already dispatched the foreclosure and eviction teams. Your designer furniture, your expensive art, and your country club memberships are currently being boxed up and placed on the front lawn. You are officially homeless, bankrupt, and entirely exposed. The absolute finality of my words hit the room like a seismic shockwave. The meticulously constructed, arrogant facade of my family shattered completely, giving way to an explosion of primal, unhinged desperation. The false decorum they had desperately tried to maintain evaporated in a split second. Vanessa was the first to completely break. She let out a blood-curdling guttural scream that echoed violently off the soundproof walls. She grabbed her expensive crystal wine glass and hurled it across the room. It smashed against the polished mahogany paneling, raining sharp shards of glass over the imported carpet. She lunged at the heavy oak table, sweeping her arms across the surface, sending plate silverware and the perfectly arranged floral centerpieces crashing to the floor in a chaotic, destructive frenzy. "I hate you!" Vanessa shrieked, her face contorted into a mask of pure, ugly rage. She tore at her perfectly styled hair, looking like a deranged stranger, rather than the polished influencer she pretended to be on the internet. "You ruined my life. You ruined everything." Jamal ignored his wife's violent meltdown entirely. Stripped of his fake wealth and facing imminent federal prison, he dropped to his hands and knees. He crawled across the floor covered in spilled wine and broken glass, grabbing the pant leg of one of the underground enforcers. "Please," Jamal begged, sobbing openly, snot running down his face in a pathetic display of cowardice. "Give me one more week. I can get the money. I will do whatever you want. Just do not let the feds take me." The enforcer simply kicked his leg free, stepping back with a look of absolute disgust, leaving Jamal weeping on the stained carpet. Harrison turned on Brenda, his patriarchal mask entirely destroyed. He grabbed her by the shoulders, shaking her violently. "This is your fault," he bellowed, spit flying from his mouth. "You told me we should leave her at the hospital. You told me she would never fight back. You arrogant, stupid woman. You cost us everything." Brenda shoved him away, slapping his chest wildly. "Do not blame me, you cowardly failure. You are the one who signed the house away to a shell company. You lost all our money. You are pathetic." They turned on each other like a pack of starving wolves, screaming, blaming, and tearing at the very fabric of their toxic dynamic. It was a spectacular, violent implosion. And high above them, discreetly mounted in the corner of the VIP dining room, the restaurant's high-definition security camera was recording every single second of their psychotic, violent meltdown. I stood perfectly still amidst the chaos, watching them destroy themselves. I did not feel an ounce of guilt. I did not feel pity. I felt the pure, unadulterated peace of absolute closure. I nodded to David and Agent Miller. "We are done here," I said quietly. My security team formed a protective wall around me, smoothly guiding me out of the VIP room and shutting the heavy frosted glass doors behind us, sealing the screaming, fighting family inside with the federal agents and the loan sharks. The restaurant manager was waiting for me in the main corridor, holding a secure digital drive. "Per your legal team's prior arrangement, ma'am," he said respectfully, handing me the drive containing the raw, unedited security footage of the entire meeting, including their violent breakdown. I thanked him and walked out through the main lobby. As I stepped through the revolving glass doors and into the cool, crisp night air, I pulled out my secure phone. I uploaded the raw, undeniable video footage directly to the internet, bypassing any edits or filters. I titled it simply, "The Truth Behind the Tears." Within minutes, the video would spread. The world would see Vanessa screaming and smashing glass. They would see Jamal begging loan sharks. They would see Brenda and Harrison admitting to abandoning me and hiding their assets. The fraudulent narrative they had built would be instantly, permanently eradicated by their own unhinged behavior. My private driver opened the door to my waiting luxury sedan. I slid into the comfortable leather seat, resting my head against the headrest. Through the tinted window, I watched as the restaurant doors burst open. Security guards physically dragged Vanessa, Jamal, Brenda, and Harrison out onto the cold concrete sidewalk. They were disheveled, screaming at each other, shoving and clawing as pedestrians stopped to stare at their pathetic public disgrace. Drive. I told my chauffeur, not taking my eyes off them, until the car pulled away from the curb. I left them there on the sidewalk, a broken, toxic mess of their own creation. The nightmare was finally over. My new life was just beginning, and for the first time it belonged entirely to me. Tara's harrowing journey from an abandoned trauma patient to an empowered architect of her own justice teaches a profound, difficult lesson. Biology does not automatically equate to family. True family is defined by loyalty, care, and the consistent choice to show up when it matters most. When Tara was left bleeding in the hospital so her parents and sister could enjoy a luxury cruise, the illusion of familial obligation shattered. We often tolerate emotional abuse and financial exploitation from relatives because society conditions us to believe blood is thicker than water. However, Tara's response proves setting absolute impenetrable boundaries is not an act of cruelty. It is the ultimate act of self-preservation and self-love. She did not just walk away, she stripped them of their power to control her narrative. By dismantling their fraudulent facade with cold, irrefutable facts, she reclaimed her autonomy. Her story reminds us that we are not obligated to set ourselves on fire to keep toxic people warm. You have the right to define your worth and ruthlessly protect your peace against those who exploit you.